Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized on Board Bill 153, floor substitute.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. Previously, the St. Louis Board of Aldermen. I wanted to just start by giving everyone an overview of where we are right now, because I know this is an odd situation to come back with a member of the board recognized as opposed to how we normally start our meetings. So what we have in front of us now is a floor substitute that was introduced by Alderwoman Saunier, seconded, and then had a voice vote to be what was in front of us. It is the same document, I believe, that we had at the beginning of our previous HUD's meeting before the floor substitute was voted out. You know, in the last few weeks, I've had a lot of conversations, and I know over the last year plus, we've all had a lot of conversations about the RAM settlement and the bills and the topics that were in front of us. Over the time, we've discussed things like water, downtown, youth, city workers. We've talked about north side, south side development, housing, transportation, so many things that everyone in this room cares about. In the development of this bill, it became clear that there were pieces of the bill that is currently in front of us that some people agreed with and some people didn't. As I was looking at the two RAMS bills that we had to discuss, it became clear to me that each one of them had a number of votes, but I didn't believe that either of them had or have the votes to pass at the Board of Aldermen this session. In having those conversations with my colleagues, it seemed to me that that was the agreement of the members of the Board of Aldermen. And when I started to ask them, what are the parts of this bill that you like, they would say water in downtown, water in north side, water and mobility, water and housing, water and transportation. And it just kept coming back to a common theme that was agreed upon in the conversations, that water kept being something that people wanted to see funding move for. In the same time that we've been experiencing these conversations with RAMS funds, we've seen an unprecedented change in our federal government. Well, I guess not unprecedented, quite precedented. Unfortunate is a better word. Unfortunate change in our federal government and their relationship with cities and how they fund us. I have a lot of concern, and I think so do my colleagues here at the board and people across this city, that we will see a federal government that is not interested in funding the priorities of cities and is not interested in making sure St. Louis has what it needs to provide the basics to its residents. That is scary to me. That makes me feel like we need to be especially prudent with our finances right now. We don't know what's coming at the state either with the earnings tax and the attacks we've seen on it. But we do know that we have these settlement funds available, and we do know that we need to provide the basics. Water is the most basic of the basic item that we provide to our public. It's the one thing that people cannot live without. We had similar conversations about water several months ago when we talked about passing an increase to the rate. During those conversations, we talked about emergency needs of the water division possibly not being able to happen because they were quite literally running out of money, had almost no money in reserves, and were not going to be able to handle emergency repairs. That's why we had to move so fast to raise the rate. The only reliable money coming to our water division is from our ratepayers. Yet right now is not a time that I'm interested in even further increasing their costs that they have, especially as we see the city struggle to perform the most basic services that it is tasked to provide. It was in thinking about all of those things that I began having conversations with my colleagues who had said over and over again that they didn't want to rush this process, that they wanted to be very thoughtful. And in those conversations, it became clear that there was a path forward here that was either we take a vote and what's in front of us doesn't move forward and nothing receives funding, and that's where we end session, or we take an alternate path in which we find something that there's not only a compromise, but actual agreement on as something that is a priority. So today, I do want to introduce a floor substitute that I am proud to say that I worked on with Alderman Sagne over the weekend, as well as almost every single person on this board I've had conversations with. I think everyone on the board now about this and what we're doing today. So I want to make sure everyone does have the floor substitute in front of them in the drive. It should have both my name and Alderman Sagne's name on it. Is the clerk able to confirm? Thank you, Alderman.
Yes, it is in the drive.
Thank you, Madam President. Alderman Sagne, from the 7th, is your impression it's also in the drive, the one that we worked on? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so thank you all so much. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to adopt floor substitute number 2.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt floor substitute 2 to Board Bill 153. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. At this time, I'm sure my colleagues have plenty to say. Thank you.
Would you like to make a I'll go ahead and then make a motion to adopt this floor substitute.
I had intended to make a motion to adopt. That was what I had intended. Yes.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 7th, that we adopt floor substitute 2 to Board Bill 153. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries. Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. We're speaking on the floor substitute now?
Correct.
Thank you. I would like to make a motion to perfect the floor substitute.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we perfect Board Bill number 153, floor substitute 2. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I think much of what Alderwoman Schweitzer said rings true about water being a universal need and being something that all of us agree to and support. And so I really wanted to just lead the way today and show the type of leadership that I think our city deserves. Everything that played out on Friday, I think, shows that I was unaware that there was a floor substitute or that a lot of my colleagues were in favor of water. And had I known that, I would have always moved in this spirit, because I'm always interested in working together on our identified interests, and whatever we need to table that we disagree on, or even if things need to be voted down, I never think that's a reason to move forward, not move forward what it is that we agree on and what our city needs. And so I'm really glad that I can stand before you all today in a much more calm space, a much more informed space, and again, just demonstrate what our city deserves. And our city deserves leaders who will put their individual feelings aside, because certainly Friday was hard and I had a lot of difficult feelings and didn't understand why conversations had to happen in private or secret, or why we would, not at least inform someone on the floor that there was a floor substitute. But I think that those things are irrelevant, because the people are most important, and our common interests and our common goals are most important. And it was never about me. It should really never be about anyone. It should be about our city. And so I'm glad that it looks like the thing that we do unify on will move forward. And, I think it's both my hope and Alderwoman Schweitzer's hope, and many of the conversations I had with colleagues over the weekend, that we could demonstrate to you that we do have the ability to move forward on what we agree on. And that, in this time, especially given the political climate that surrounds us and given the dire needs of the city, that we understand that public trust and public confidence is most important. And how can you have confidence in people that can't work together collaboratively, or that need to do it in a way that is hurtful to each other? And so I'm, excited that we were able to reach this agreement and this consensus this, and I do just also want to apologize to city residents and to stakeholders and to everyone who has participated of the committee of the whole and maybe felt disappointed or hurt or disencouraged by what you saw on Friday. Even though I did not know what happened, I think as leaders we have to take accountability. And so I'm very happy that hopefully today can demonstrate to you all that we can figure this out and that we can have hard conversations and we can come together on the things we agree on. And when we disagree, we can do it both productively and respectfully.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Excuse me. Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I want to rise just to first off thank everyone for all of their work on the two underlying bills, but particularly Alderwoman Schweitzer for putting together this amendment. There was a ton of work that went into the underlying bills, and I get that. My issue with it is that I think we ended up with two bad bills at the end. We were spreading money too thin. Then President Trump came into office. We saw federal cuts. We don't know what's happening with the earnings tax. In the committee of the whole, one of the things that everyone agreed on was water, and many of us also agreed on the idea of some sort of endowment moving forward. Then suddenly there was a rush to get this money all out the door just before an election. But I know when I'm at my neighborhood meetings and I'm talking to people in my community, they're not pushing me for childcare. They're not pushing me for college funds. What they're pushing me for is water, trash, paving streets. They'd like to see a police officer from time to time, and they're looking to get the basics taken care of. And this goes a long way towards doing that. And I hope that when we're looking to allocate the rest of these funds that we can revisit that endowment idea. City, we can get back to doing the basics because we are failing at that right now. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. I rise in support of this forced substitute as well. I really appreciate the discussion that has happened, and I think we can all agree that the current climate is undeniable. It's only been a couple weeks, and already we're seeing severe threats to federal funding that many city programs and many planned projects in our city depend on. There's not really time for us to disagree on this, and I don't want to be fighting each other. I think the city has to stand united when it comes to this threat. While there are many needs in this city, we can all agree that water is a pressing need that can get to work on right now. So we heard from our division director during this process that we had that the water division has over $130 million in critical infrastructure needs. The money in this bill is structured in a way that the water division can maximize this $40 million in a way that might address those critical needs. And we heard from our director, Naresh Patel, that there are projects that the water division can get to work on relatively immediately. So this is the only thing in which there is true consensus on the board right now. And I just believe it's the most responsible thing we can do today. It's the most prudent thing. There's been a seismic shift in our nation's politics, but here in St. Louis, I think we still care about what affects our people. And so while I can't speak for all of my colleagues, I can speak myself and say that I'm still committed to getting money to North City to make sure that there is that investment that has been promised for so many decades and that we build our tax base by providing what they need. I am still committed to getting money for downtown, which I've mentioned has lost $330 million in assessed value. That affects all of us in the city. When downtown's not paying as much taxes, it hurts all of us. So I want to thank Alderwoman Schweitzer for her foresight on this, and to my colleagues who put aside our differences to come together to address one of our city's most critical needs. And I'm looking forward to working with you all in the next session to continue to address the needs in our city. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. Will the Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questions?
The Alderwoman from the 1st yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 6th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to you and Alderwoman Sonier for all this work. and for finding a path forward, and for everybody. I know a lot of people have put, I want to echo my colleagues, saying a lot of people have put a lot of work into the bills and where we got here today. Just want to ask some questions about water. So if we move this $40 million in from the $294 million settlement, do you know approximately how much that will reduce that monthly interest payment? Or that monthly interest from the big principal?
I don't believe it would.
So it's still going to stay in the same?
It would still be gaining interest as 40 million, and then the bill lays out how the allocations would be made over time.
Okay, so it wouldn't affect the 1.2?
It would still be gaining interest until the money is allocated, or until the money rather is spent.
Okay. And just, I think for the record, I know that we've talked about it, we've heard former Commissioner Scooby talk about the total cost of what our infrastructure would really, what that bigger cost is. Can you just talk a little bit more about what that looks like for us in the city?
Sure. We've heard estimates from $400 to $500 million of need in infrastructure improvements in the water division. 130 million of those needs are labeled as urgent. This is reflected on capital needs assessments for the water division over the last several years.
Thank you. I have no other questions. I just want to say for the record too, I think to echo Alderman Browning, you know, I know that there's been a lot of conversation about what we should do with the money, obviously, and that the landscape of the landscape has changed from the Biden administration to the current administration. And I think it is prudent for us to move carefully and thoughtfully again into this next iteration of how we will spend the Rams money, just given that we don't really know how our federal funds are going to look like in the next few years. And so I do think this move, where I know there's needs in lots of places in the city, and there is a desire to, of course, support people, and we want to continue to do that. And I think as leaders in this legislative body, we must continue to look at the realities of where we're at, and that includes really, like it or not, a hostile administration that is going to potentially pull lots of federal funding in the future from our city. So, thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Got it, thank you. Good morning, Madam President, members of the board. It's interesting for me to sit down here and hear revisionist history. When we passed the board bill to raise our water rates in a month's time, which is unheard of in the state of Missouri and any place else, I stood on this floor and said, hey, we need to put money in the water department, not before any of you all. I also know much more about what has happened with the water department than most of you all do. In fact, all of you all. I know about, maybe with the exception of the alderman from the former 10th, now current 5th, about when we had a vote. It wasn't really a vote, but there was a revolt in the water department because they didn't feel like that things were getting done under the former director. They actually talked about getting rid of the former director. I've been through, I guess, 3 or 4 water public utility directors. I asked about when we were talking about this former, when we were passing the water bill to increase the cost of our water bill, which my water bill has gone up significantly. I asked about were we going to apply for grants that were out there. It was laid back. We didn't do what we were supposed to do. We did not do what we were supposed to do. But we went ahead and passed that money. We had a big chunk of money, the ARPA funds, that I would have been glad to give all of it to the water department. So I laughed when a year and a half later, the residents said what I had said a year and a half ago. And the reason they did is because they're not down here at this board being dysfunctional, because this is a dysfunctional board. And so when they start seeing the water coming up in their streets, which it does that all the time, this is not the first year. And then some people from the water department called me, because what you don't know is that, many of you don't know, I used to be the chair of public employees And the water department employees were getting so little amount of money that I literally got them $10,000 and $15,000 raises because I couldn't believe we were paying the people so little that went up under our streets to take care of our pipes and things. And we didn't pay them. We paid them less than janitors almost. Okay? So I really do believe in water. But what I don't believe in, we spend all the money on other stuff, and then we say, wait a minute. Oh, okay, now we're scared, and now we're frightened. There was always the possibility that Donald Trump was going to be the next president because he never stopped running. And we had this money, ARPA funds, which was this giant amount of money. And on July the 9th, 2021, I remember it so well because that's my mother's 86th birthday, and I was in Illinois, and we had like a 10-hour meeting about how to spend these ARPA funds. And then we sat on these funds for a couple of years and didn't get spent. Now, the giant opportunity would have been to put that all into infrastructure, but we didn't. Now we're patting ourselves on the back. I'm the only one who can pat myself on the back. All of you all did not do that, okay? I did. I knew about that we could do other things. But nobody, down here, what we did on April the 18th was to tell the city of St. Louis that seniority and experience and education didn't matter, that we had a woke board of aldermen, and we were going to strip the senior aldermen of their experience. And then we had a bunch of people running around here who don't know what they're doing. It's dysfunctional down here. So now we come here and we said, oh, we're all in charge of making sure that the water gets taken care of. No, you aren't. You're just trying to clean up a mess that you made. I like it when people say, this is my fault, because I do it all the time if I do something. Say, this is my fault that part of this happened because I was not running a good board. I was too busy being part of this rat pack, this new progressives that didn't know what they were doing. And I've been saying that from the beginning. Go look at April the 18th, 2023. You'll see what I talked about then. Racism, sexism, ageism. It doesn't work. And now, because we start talking about doing something for North St. Louis, and it's a little money. It's a very little money. Just like that little $36 million that people keep talking about, which shouldn't have gotten mixed up, but it got mixed up where everybody's like, oh, North St. Louis people, they're not spending the funds right. That's no money. I tell them, if we're talking about $36 million, that means we're not talking about $460-something million. Where is that money? I've been down here for 30 years and watched money that was supposed to go to North St. Louis go to downtown and the Central Quarter. I've watched block grant money, all kinds of money, go to other places except for where it was applied for. If you did that for a bank loan, you would go to jail. In fact, some people did go to jail about the Chase Park Plaza and other things. So I have a history. That's something usually in other bodies that's revered. When you have education and experience and history and you're fair and you are, to quote one alderman, I've never seen somebody with so much experience that was shared, and he knows who he is that said that, okay? And so, but we didn't want to do that. We were going to run this. And I say we, even though I was not part of this. We were going to run this. We are running this into the ground. City of St. Louis is an embarrassment, not just from this incident that happened Friday, which we went into an illegal recess. That is not how you do a recess. When you do a recess, you have to have a motion and a second, and you have to have a vote, which we didn't have. You all know me to be a rules person. If you haven't learned that, I am. I sat there and watched this in dismay. I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed to be the most senior member, and this is how we conduct ourselves. And then we come back and we say, oh, we're doing something great. No, we aren't. Because now the very people that we haven't taken care of, then we say, we got to hold this money because we don't know what. Well, I'll tell you what we should do. Let's take back that first, because we didn't get $250 million of the Rams money. We got $280. And the first thing we did that was a priority was to give $30 million to the convention center. Then we sat down here and gave another $16 million of ARPA interest to the Rams Fund. There's a big article in the Business Journal about that. So we've given $46 million already to downtown. Now, I was not on either bill, and I didn't like either one of them. I particularly did not like the bill that talked about giving downtown more money than North St. Louis, because they've gotten billions of dollars. And I can bring it all up. They've gotten $10 million to put in fiber cable in the streets for Washington Avenue. So here we come with a bill that says give $70 million to downtown and $40 million to North St. Louis. No, because when we start talking about this, we were 28, and I do still want downtown to be an economic factor, but I don't want it to get money at the expense of North St. Louis, because they've made a lot of mistakes. Many of them I talked about on this floor over the years. They overbuilt the loft. They overdid things downtown. For 30-some years since I've been in politics, they've talked about if we put more money here, we'll fix it. $40 million is not going to fix a water thing. But we're pushing that through as something we all agree on. I don't agree on it. And in North St. Louis, my community doesn't agree with it, okay? And why is it that we always can hold up in North St. Louis? Because that's easy for you to say that. That's easy. You talk about being fair, but you're not fair. What you're doing is you're hurting communities that could thrive. So you say water is so important. First of all, when you put this money into the water funds, which you're going to vote through, I guess, what you do, I hope you understand, the water department is in the 13th ward, where we do water. It's up by the chain of rocks and the alderwoman from the 13th ward. And before you fix all these little things you think you're going to fix, because they're only going to be small, you're going to start having to fix from the chain of rocks and come south. You're not going to just be able to patch and fix a pipeline without doing some other things. I do not support having a deal that leaves out North St. Louis. I'm good. I want to help downtown, but I'm good with North St. Louis getting 70 and downtown getting 40. I don't support a bill where the people who said they wanted to partner with me would then turn around and have some other people say, well, we're going to give more money if you give more money to downtown. That is the problem with this city. I don't support putting money not into child care, because that should be funded a very different way. I do believe in child care. I built a school that actually has an early childhood center on to it. I built Lexington School, the first in North St. Louis. So when I hear people now talk about how great it is for the water to be fixed, but we're going to hold off on everything else, and I start to hear, well, we may need this money for something else, what I hear is that we're not going to do what we promise every time to North St. Louis. We're not going to address it. We're just going to be making promises that do not happen. So although I want the water to be fixed, and although I actually talked about it before any of you all who are taking credit, you should get up and say, I want to thank Alderwoman Tyus for always talking about it. You're not getting up there. You're giving credit to somebody who passed the bill without having a minute's thought to what I was saying. It's interesting how we pat people's backs who have done the wrong thing. When I pointed out about the board bill about excise being wrong, people got up and said, but we did the work in committee. Not when you passed out a board bill that every line in it was wrong. That's not work. We don't do work. We don't value doing research. We don't value talking to we don't value talking to people. We don't value learning what we ought to do. Then we come back and try to fix things backhanded and say what a great thing this is. And I talk to people, but you don't ever listen. This is not a good bill. We are not in any hurry. We could put something together, and I told you all that Friday, and I didn't have a bone in this, a dog in this fight. I said, we're not in any hurry. The mayor can call us back into session. We can do that and sit down and really talk about it and really try to make a compromise. I took the side, even though I didn't agree with Board Bill 131, I talked to the Alderman for the 14th about how foul that is to make an agreement and then change it. That's a sucker punch. That's what makes people not trust you. Then you change it and then come out. So I absolutely voted to bring that board bill out of committee. Even though I didn't agree with the bill, I agree with that you cannot go and have a press conference and then change things and act like that doesn't change things, because it does. And she was absolutely right. That deal is dead. So I got calls like, well, we want to have a win-win situation. I'm not having a win situation. How is North St. Louis having a win situation? How is Southeast St. Louis having a win situation? I understand downtown already got it because they done got all the money, because we gave them $46 million already. Do I still agree that they might need some more? Yes, but it has to be in a way that's productive. We want to fund early childhood, then we need to look at other ways. And is that not going to happen under the Trump administration? More than likely it will not. So we have to find a way to do it. But it's not at the expense of North St. Louis. And nobody gets to tell me, well, we're doing this for North St. Louis. No, you're not. We want brick and mortar the same way that other people have wanted all this time. So when you pass this, it will be my objection. Hopefully the mayor will not go along with it, but she probably will. She's been going along with everything else, which is why she got a rating of 31%. Maybe she will get that you all are not doing good leadership, and this should not be done. We have no reason to pass the water bill and leave everything else out. The whole thing about a compromise is to do something that people can agree to. It is not a compromise when you get together and you say, we're just going to pull out the water bill because that's the only thing people agree with. Well, I agreed with that a year and a half ago, and you couldn't hear it. So I don't have to agree with it now. And I don't have to pretend like, oh, I'm doing something great, because you're not doing anything great. You're making it harder to make a compromise. And when I hear the alderwoman from the 6th saying, well, we don't know what we're going to happen, what that is code for we're probably not going to spend this money. No, no, and no. My answer is no. This is not a good bill. This is unfair. I will not support it. I hope that other people will not support it. We do not have to get this passed. We can do this. We can be called back into session at any time. It's a 3-day notice. I want to introduce you guys to the charter. It's something that I read and know often. You all don't know about it, and you don't know about how to be nurtured because you're too busy trying. Because you get elected, it doesn't make you a leader. A leader is about learning how to follow the rules so that everybody gets treated fairly, so that you nurture people, which is something I've been known to do, so that you teach other people what you know. You don't hoard the information. You actually work with them, and you're fair. This is not fair. So you could talk about Lisa Sonia, the Alderwoman from the 7th and the Alderwoman from the 1st. You live in South St. Louis, you might think it's fair, but in North St. Louis, it's not fair. And the people that I heard from didn't think the bill that gave that city $70 more million downtown, and North St. Louis 40, they didn't think that was fair either. We do still want an economic engine, but I don't want an agreement that then we can come back and say, okay, we can't do the rest. When you hold it out, and if we all do agree on the water, then we need to keep that as part of the bargaining tool. And even though I don't agree with doing the child care things, if that's something a good portion of the board needs, then that also needs to be a bargaining tool. But when you start taking people out, my experience is you don't get those other things done. They just become a lost promise, which has been what has been going on for many, many years. And so, again, nobody talked about water before me, and we didn't do a daggum thing. And now, again, we're doing it at the expense of North St. Louis. I do not agree with it. I do not agree with it. It is not a good idea. It is not a good compromise. It is just pass something that I agree with and then get it done. For these reasons, I will be voting against it, and I will be asking for a roll call vote.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the committee, or I always say committee, members of the board. You know, I want to kind of take us back a little bit. You know, we started this RAMS process over a year ago, and we all engaged in it. We made sure that folks in our community either was able to go on the portal to say what their ideas were, or was able to, for wards like myself and the 11th and the 13th and 12th, there was some intentional energy around making sure that there was paper surveys so that people voices could be part of the process. After those surveys and that portal was out there, then almost for, I want to say 6-8 months, we had a committee of the whole where each alder attended the committee of the whole, and we heard from every idea that residents, said around housing, around childcare, around water, around investment in North St. Louis, revolving loans, a lot of great ideas. And, I rarely do this, but I 110% agree with the alderwoman from the 12th Ward. This isn't compromise. This was, if we go back to Friday, this was a deal that was made with selected alders that say, out of both bills, and in both of those pieces of legislation, there was, as they said, we all agree on water. I think in both pieces of legislation, we both agree that we need to invest in North St. Louis. In Board Bill 153, you've seen a large chunk of money going to North St. Louis. In Board Bill 131, you've seen 120-some million going to North St. Louis. And then we come Friday, and somehow we say, oh, we just all agree on water. And it is a shame, and it is kind of a slap in the face for me as a black alder to hear from my colleagues, oh, we care about Northside, or oh, I go tour and I look at all the beautiful infrastructure, we need to support it, but let's not do that right now. Let's just do water. And the reality is, us giving $40 million right now to water after we just raised people a water bill is still going to be, a pun on words, a drop in the bucket to water. They need ultimately 400-some million. Northside needs probably this whole Rams bill. The water needs this whole Rams bill. There's never enough money. But honestly, I think it's sickening that we can say that everyone only agree with water. Let's do that now. But then say we agree with Northside, but let's come back to the table next session and talk about how we do it. So with that, Madam President, I have an amendment to Board Bill 153, floor substitute, and I will ask for its adoption.
It's been moved by the alderman from the 14th, seconded by the alderwoman from the 12th, that we adopt amendment number 1 to Board Bill 153, floor substitute 2. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Thank you, Alderwoman from the 2nd or 12th. You had several numbers. I do hear you was first, 20th. See, I know the numbers now. Almost all of them. But what this does is, this amendment would, and I want to be clear, this is not just saying that we can't come back and do more to North St. Louis, that we can't come back and add more funding. But I don't know, how do we get to a place where we can say we're okay with doing water and taking away, honestly, all the people's voices that have been part of this process? Because to say that we all agree on water, yes, everybody at this board believes we should invest in water. There's not one person that would say we shouldn't invest in water. But for months, I will say people in my community that I have to represent have said, also, we need to invest in North St. Louis. Also, we need to invest in other entities downtown. But one thing that we know was clear in both bills was Northside. What was clear in both bills was water. So why are we not coming to the table saying, if we can do water now, we also can do North St. Louis, and this amendment will carve out $50 million for Northside, and there still would be $210 million in the Rams money that will continue to grow interest. But I think, I've seen the interviews, I've seen the press conferences, I've seen how both sponsors was talking about this being a transformational bill. This is a bill that is going to really help North St. Louis. And I would feel, as a Northside alder who also have downtown, but as mainly in North St. Louis, I would feel like I didn't do my due diligence if I'm only saying that I'm going to walk away today and invest 40 in water and then tell my people and tell North St. Louis that we're going to come back next session. Coming from the state legislature, we do the work now. I mean, we could meet for 5 hours and hash this out. We have a great framework. We got 2 pieces of legislation right here. If half of the board say we can be okay with water, why can't other half of the board say if water's a start? I think down or north side should also be a start. But just to say it's water and that's it, that's just a compromise. That's all we agree on. I want to be clear. That is not the only thing that the aldermen from the 14th agree on. I also agree that we need to make critical investments in north side. And I believe that people that talk about investing in north side should not only put they should put their money where their mouth is. And basically saying, come back next session. Yes, we have 2 months. Okay, if we got 2 months, either we do two things. We can invest in water in north side, or how about this? We don't do anything because we don't then pick winners and choosers. Let's not do anything. Let's come back next session. As people say, the energy and the temperature is down. Everyone can take their gloves off. But to just say we going to walk away and do water, and then we're going to come back North St. Louis, and then we're going to care, and we're going to make sure that y'all at the table. No, I want to make sure that I'm at the table now. I want to make sure that my community get investment now. This is literally $40 million is a drop in the bucket. $50 million that would be going to North St. Louis is a drop. But if we're going to say one is okay without the other, I don't know. I think it's beyond sickening. And I hope for everybody that watch this on YouTube and watch this either on their TV screens, and I'll be asking for a roll call on this amendment, Madam President, because I think it's important to hold folks accountable. If you say you care about North St. Louis, this is an opportunity, and many opportunities that we have took out of this session, to be clear. This is an opportunity to show that we can do water and we can do north side. We can walk and chew gum. One is not more important than the other. And if that's the case, let's just start over on all pieces of legislation and be intentional about water, be intentional about housing, be intentional about infrastructure, be intentional about investing in north side. What we're doing right now, we literally stripped the alderwoman from the 7th bill. The backup plan is to strip the alderwoman from the 13th wards bill and then just say water only. And in both of those bills, what you've seen is investment in North St. Louis. And I think it's a shame for my colleagues to say, oh, we only agree. And even though some compromise was made, some actions were happened, but we're just going to strip both of y'all bills. And I'm going to be honest, being led by people who do not look like me, it is nasty work, as a young kid say. And if we do not adopt the North Side Fund, I want to be very clear. I support water, but I do not support water without leaving out the people who need the help the most, and I believe that's North St. Louis. With that, I would take any questions, Madam President.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 13th.
Thank you, Madam President. I wanted to ask, I didn't have a question for the Alderman for the 14th. I wanted to know if I could ask a question of the Alderwoman of the 12th.
The Alderwoman from the 12th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 13th. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderwoman Tyus, could you tell me how long ago, because you've been down here longer than I have, and so as a senior alderperson, how long ago have we been talking about the dollars that was created for tax credit and all of that, and it went to the wrong areas? How long has that conversation been?
Well, I first came here in 1991, and I have newspaper articles because the Post-Dispatch called me in 1991 about how the block grant money and all this money was being spent, and it's a very good reporter. He's now in Chicago. And he started with one interview, and when he finished, he did a whole article about how the money was being applied for one place and sent to another. I actually have those articles. I have shared them with people before. Your predecessor, Chris Carter, I shared them with. So since 1991 was which I came down here. And the former mayor, who I'm friends with, got so mad at that article because it exposed how much money had been spent in the Central Quarter and downtown. But when you looked at the applications of what they said was wrong, they applied for the money on the backs of North St. Louis. But only a little money, and I've been very fortunate. You know my ward. You know I was able to build a grocery store, a bank, a credit union, a school. But I never thought that was okay, that I get to do it, and that all the rest of North St. Louis get to do it. So it's really before 1991. But when I came here in 91, I started digging, and when the reporter called me, I said to him, but you're looking at this story wrong. Why don't you look at where the money has been spent? And he actually did probably about 5 days in the front of the Post-Dispatch about all the things that have been done wrong to North St. Louis. Now, since that time that we had that mayor, then we had Freeman Bosley, then we had Clarence Harmon and Francis Slade for 4 terms, Lyda Cruson, and Tashara Jones. Not any of them has corrected what was started. Okay, in fact, Francis Slade is the worst one of all because he exacerbated it. Because when he came to my ward and found out that I was doing so much development, he tore my ward up. And he and the former president told me that I could go to South St. Louis because I should be able to do that in South St. Louis, as though South St. Louis, and the former president being Louis Reed, that South St. Louis was more important than the 20th Ward. I sat in my spot and said, I'm not going anywhere. I'll be back down here because North St. Louis deserves what should have been given to them. And I want to say, Alderwoman from the 13th, if you apply for a bank loan and then you spend it at the house next door, you will get charges against you. And I never have understood how the city of St. Louis applied for all this money and then they didn't put it in the proper places. Because if they had, we all know that the former 27th Ward, 2nd, 21st Ward, the real 20th Ward, and the 1st Ward were all black middle-class meccas. And if they had only done half of what they were supposed to do, or a fourth, we would still have the black middle-class population in North St. Louis. In fact, we have something called the Team 4 plan, which everybody says, oh, why do you talk about it? Because it's steady being implemented. This, what they're doing today, is just further of implementing it. Oh, yes, we understand we've done you wrong, but now let us not do you right. Let's make you 2nd and 3rd and 15th, okay? No. Prioritize me. Take that money back from the convention center. This is the 2nd or 3rd time since I've been down here we redo the convention center. Kitty Ratcliffe told us 30 million would be enough. Then we came back and gave 16 more. We gave all the ARPA funds interest at that time, and nobody said anything. Everybody was like, that's okay. But if you talk about $30 million in North St. Louis or 40, people go, oh my God, they're spending all the money. That's how you do racism, okay? That's so since 1991 and before, because the reports that the reporter did, and when we come back Friday, I'll have them on people's desks, was even before I came down there. So this has been going on for a very long time because the Team 4 plan called for there to be withdrawal of services in North St. Louis,
Right.
Not to pick up our trash, not to tear down our buildings, not to give us the services, and they called it benign neglect, but it was actively undermining North St. Louis and not give us any money, so much so that when I built my grocery store and other things, the people who lived in the ward say, Alderwoman, we can't do that. They were so scared for me that I had enough nerves to think we ought to have something equal to other neighborhoods.
Thank you, Alderwoman, for answering that in a long version. But I wanted to be very clear that when my co-sponsors and I first came out with 131, we didn't ask for it to be moved out because Alderwoman from the 12th, I knew from the history you taught me and from other Alder people that it was a lot of work that had to be done. When they called the press conference, I made it clear to the media, I don't know why we're having this, because we still have negotiations that need to happen. I still stand on that. I haven't changed that because I'm sorry, $50 million for 75 years of disinvestment is just a drop in the bucket. That's an insult to my community. And I will not sell my community for $50 million. And so my question is, as a black alderperson that started as a block unit person, that became a committee person, that was in a vibrant ward, that knew the struggles that her alderperson had to go through just to get the basics done. And as Alderwoman Tyus said, it was always a challenge for North St. Louis to get the basics. When they came with the bright idea that if you get less alder people, you'll have better services. And we stated, you will not, because we're not getting services in the first place. So this is my notice to everybody that thinks that you can sell North St. Louis for $50 million. You cannot. We are not for sale for $50 million. And when you have people that's behind my back and the other alder people that represents North St. Louis back and cutting deals already for the $40 million, you think I'm going to give you another 10 to take over my ward and say what projects will be developed, what houses will be built? I refuse. Contrary to what people believe, the water department sits in my ward. The workhouse sits in my ward. And you have done everything to destroy my ward. I didn't ask to be given this, but rather people know it or not, I have a small state representative's district. And so until you give me what's due to me, my people are not asking for special treatment. They just want what's due to us. Give us what we have been waiting for 75 years. Thank you.
Alderman from the 3rd, are you still at the microphone? And then I'm going to the Alderwoman from the 11th, just so you know.
I'll yield to the Alderwoman.
Okay, Alderwoman from the 11th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. So I rise in support of Alderwoman Pam Boyd. We've had conversations about this all along, and I agree 100%, and I've said over and over, 50 million will not touch the level of disrespect that has been shown in North St. Louis. It is unacceptable. And so this money can remain in the bank earning some interest until we come back and renegotiate this. I am not going to accept 50 million divided among, 4 wards, 5 wards, whatever. Unacceptable. That is not going to do anything to really turn North St. Louis around. And the negotiations don't work like, okay, I'll give you 50 million and you say okay. No, it's not okay. It's never been okay. We keep going through the same thing over and over and over again, and we keep playing these same games over and over again. It is unacceptable. I will not, and I want to be very clear, I will not accept 50 million for my ward. I will not accept 50 million for North St. Louis. This is a slap in the face. It is insulting that it is offered. Thank you.
Any further discussion, Alderman from the 3rd?
Thank you, Madam President. I am still on the fence with respect to this amendment. Obviously, I was supportive of the compromise that came out of committee with Board Bill 153. My colleague mentioned that North St. Louis was in both bills, 131 and 153. So was downtown. So was Southeast City. So was housing. There were a lot of different things that were in both bills that aren't in this floor substitute. I've had conversations with various folks in the last few hours about whether or not this passes. If it passes, I fully intend to bring forward an amendment. We'll just pervert the process and get back to a place where no one is going to be comfortable voting for anything down here, unfortunately. There's been a lot of discussion around these monies being a drop in the bucket. That is 100% true. Our city has great needs. We have billions and billions and billions of dollars of need, and this is a few hundred million. This is not even a year's worth of our annual revenue, to put it in perspective for folks. So when we're talking about adding more to this bill, and it's not reflective of either what came out of committee or was pulled out of committee last week, I'm very apprehensive to move forward, with more amendments and piecemealing a piece of legislation, on the premise that, different communities have different needs and, that one item was in both bills. There were many items that were in both bills. These are all drops in the bucket compared to the need that we have as a city. So, if this goes forward, and folks vote for it, please, I believe I already have amendment number 2 in the drive to include and establish a Southeast City Fund. So I'll be taking that up next in the event that this does make its way as an addition to the bill, and I would expect that, folks support it as well. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is a case where I agree with a lot of what has been said before me, and I think that this is the difficulty of these conversations, and this is the danger of us getting to this point and not really having consensus. The goal of having the committee of the whole process and having a process where every alder, where the mayor, where the comptroller could be involved, was so that we could get here. My intention of, in consensus, my intention of making sure that there was like open communication with all of us and the willingness to talk is to get here. So I'm really struggling in my own mind with this because, obviously, as I mentioned, I was blindsided by the floor substitute of Friday, but at the same time, it was the one thing that it seemed like folks supported. And also, I was not a part of those conversations, but there were colleagues from all across the city that were a part of those conversations and seemed to have, that consensus around that item. At the same time, I'm not going to say that I disagree with the alderman of the 14th. I can understand why, if North City was a key component of both bills, and it was, disinvested communities was what was said over and over again in so many talking points for many of us, why there's shit in front of us that has the potential to pass, but doesn't include any of that language and doesn't include that part of the city. I can also understand frustrations of folks who are saying, we should wait, we should let it collect more interest, and we should come back, and we should do this in the new session when we come back. I think that this is just, if anything, shows us the importance of, again, doing our due diligence to have these conversations and to have as much consensus. It makes me very nervous to see additional amendments and the moving of money and funds without an overall plan at this moment. Again, whether folks agree with the plans that were presented, the idea was that there was a plan and there was an idea to move together. And so I am concerned about the different piecings of it, but at the same time, I do agree with the alderman for the 14th, and I actually do agree with the alderwoman of the 12th. For most of the comments, obviously not the comments about age or inexperience, but I agree with the sentiment of what's being said, that North City has been waiting a long time, that, I can see why people will be insulted, that people have used North City as a talking point, that it has been something that was mentioned and referenced over and over again, and yet what is coming out today does not include that. But I am not 100% sure about the way to move forward at this point, because I do really think at this point the best thing for us to do is to really sit down and have a discussion and figure out an overall plan for how we would like these things to go. And I would hope that we would agree with putting these funds in North City and with Southeast City, as the alderman from the 3rd said. And what's unfortunate now is, I'm very scared and nervous that we've hit a point where we're having this conversation where it's this portion of the city against this portion of the city. And I'm a strong believer that either all of the city wins and all of the city thrives. And I think that if we were to come to the table and work together, we could hopefully arrive at something where majority of the needs of our city are met and we have some kind of consensus. And so I did want to just to speak to that and to put that on the record as I understand the nature of what's being said. I understand why the amendment would be brought forth. I also do understand a desire to press pause after Friday's meeting and to make sure that we have the opportunity to build consensus with one another. And I also can hear the differing perspectives on should we give North City money now, or should we come back and give North City, and then should we add in Southeast City? And I'm very nervous that we can continue this and somebody say, well, let's add in downtown, and then that kind of gets us away from the point of let's do the thing that we agree on now and focus on the others. But I did just want to rise and say that I do understand the frustrations, and I do appreciate whether or not it gets the votes or not. I appreciate the amendment being brought forth, because it has been a key component of many conversations that have happened and has been a key talking point for many folks around this legislation.
Alderwoman from the 12th, are you still at the mic? Alderwoman from the 12th, are you still at the mic? You were up next to be recognized.
I'm sorry, I thought the Alderman from the 14th was next.
I can go to him next if you would like.
Okay, well, I just want to say something. We talk about long time. When the Rams funds, I'm sorry, Madam President, members of the board, let me get it correct.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
When the Rams money was first introduced, before the Alderman from the 7th, I introduced a resolution on March 25th, 2022, before you guys came, about what should be done with the Rams. The fact that we, the Board of Aldermen, were not being appraised of even how the money was being settled. So I've been concerned about the Rams money way before some of you were not here. I also want to bring to the forefront, the Committee of the Whole was never used like this. This was not what the Committee of the Whole was supposed to be done. And so when I see it used like this, it's very disturbing to me because that's not what it's supposed to be done, how it's done. Anyway, it was done that way. But I will emphasize again, a piecemeal portion that says we're going to pass the water and not the rest of it is going to be something that is going to be very troubling. You're not solving anything. The best way we can solve anything, and don't call me and tell me to come back to this Board of Aldermen, and then you don't want to hear my experience, okay? Leave me alone. I was at home at Zoom. That's what I was doing, letting you guys run it. If you don't want to hear experience, and I don't care if the new people don't like it, there's a reason for experience. And we can work it out. We needed to let tempers settle down. We need to let this thing settle down. But just you're going to get your way, Alderwoman from the 1st, at the expense of the black aldermen is not a way that we're going to have anything done. So I'm telling you again, this is not a good idea. This is not a good idea. So we have these bills. We can compromise these bills. We can have whole committees of the wholes as a special committee to talk about it. We can have caucuses. We can do all kinds of things. But trying to push this before and say, we agree on a water bill, we do not. When you have leverage, you do not give it up. So if water is important to you, North St. Louis is important to me, we sit down and we work things out. Southeast St. Louis is important to the aldermen from the 3rd. We work things out. We work things out. We do not come and try to pass a piecemeal bill. Because other than that, I'm going to support the alderman from the 14th. If he comes and says give it all to North St. Louis, I'm going to be his second, and I'm going to be up here speaking to it. So let's learn to compromise. First thing about getting a lesson, if you all had not taken away seniority, you wouldn't think everything came to your mind should be the way it should. You would know a learning about experience and what has been happening before. And if you don't want to do that, you're going to repeat it over and over. And don't try to just blame the president, because you are part of the problem, okay? So either we put this bill up, all of them, and sit down and come and spend our time to figure out something that's fair to everybody. And sometimes you get a little of everything and not a lot of everything. Or we're just going to fight the water bill and continue to fight it, and it's not successful, and it's not where you want to go. So please stop doing this.
Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you, Madam President. I think I have some unease about what's happening right now, and I just want to say, I think we're getting all these piecemeal amendments. I've got a 3rd one on my desk, and I frankly think it's dangerous for us to be putting millions and millions of dollars in here and there without a plan. I do want to say, I'm going to echo what my colleague from the 4th said. Look, we're in an election year. Why there is an urgent need to resolve some of the problems at our city, these problems did not start today. The disinvestment in parts of our city did not start today. It did not start 6 months ago. And I think that this false sense of urgency is because we're in election year. We don't actually have to spend this money at any time. This money does not have to be allocated or spent, unlike the ARPA funds. And I think it is incumbent on us in this body to make prudent and good decisions, given all that we have talked about the landscape, I'm looking at our budget here from the projections of our 5-year budget outlook, and we've got a 10-year gap starting in 26 all the way up to a projected $38.9 million gap between revenues and expenditures over the next 5 years. Now, we know some of that could change. My concern about these piecemeal throwing out $20 million, $50 million, $100 million here and there is that we don't have a plan, and that plan comes at the expense of the long-term needs of our city. And so because we don't have a real need, this is a false sense of urgency. Again, not saying that there isn't an urgent need to solve some of the problems, but this is frankly, some of this desire to get this done, I feel like, is created because we're in an election year. And I say that because I don't think it's something that we shouldn't forget, that our commitment is to really resolve things for the long-term health of the city. And I don't think throwing out millions of dollars in amendments today is the right way to do it.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. With that, I would like to make a motion that I withdraw my amendment to Board Bill 153, floor sub.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
My second.
Okay. Your motion and your second has been withdrawn. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt amendment number 3.
Is there a second?
To board.
Second always.
Okay.
That's correct.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 12th, that we adopt amendment number 3 to Board Bill 153, floor substitute. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I think what was critical is what I heard from especially some of my colleagues from North St. Louis, that 50 wasn't enough, and the reality is in both bills there was more money. Especially in Board Bill 131, there actually was $120 million. So I'm standing on this, that I think we need to make critical investments in North St. Louis. What this amendment would do is, instead of $50 million, it will put $100 million to North St. Louis. Again, in the legislation that was in Board Bill 131, it actually had $120 million. So I think this is, if we're trying to stay in the spirit of the bill, and I think what my alderwoman from the 11th, elevated 11th and 13th said is that 50 is not enough to take back to their community. I think 100 is absolutely an appropriate number, that we can make sure that those funds are on the table. Let me be very clear. This does not stop the RAMS process. This does not stop continuous conversation, and all the money would not be spent, but we would still have over 100 and I want to say $60 million still on the table that can go to critical needs, such as infrastructure that was in legislation, such as potentially childcare, such as potentially figuring out how we invest in our workforce. But we keep saying, let's negotiate, let's negotiate. I'm here to negotiate, but I think what's very clear is that it is, in what you don't always see, again, is me and the alderwoman from the 12th. If y'all probably look at the YouTubes, we do a lot of back and forth, but saying North St. Louis should not be left out. And again, if my colleagues, want to, say, well, let's not even do water and let's come back to the table, I think that's okay. But I think $100 million is, I think, in the spirit of what we continue to say to make sure we invest in North St. Louis. And with that, I would take any questions from my colleagues.
Need further discussion? Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I have the same concerns as I voiced on the last amendment with respect to this amendment, except we're doubling the amount. So I have already sent amendment number 4 to the clerk, which will also double the amount for Southeast City.
I don't care.
Continue to talk about disinvestment in our communities. I would be hard pressed not to mention Southeast City is one of the most diverse communities in the entire St. Louis region. It has seen decades of disinvestment as well, which is why it has been evaluated as EGI Area 1 and 2 and 3. Some of you have frequented Black-owned businesses in the Third Ward, Intertwine Wine Bar, Your Place Diner, some others that weren't even eligible for Northside, economic development funds that we tried to fight for Southeast City as well. And we continually talk about reinvestment in disinvested parts of our community. Southeast City lost, as soon as I was elected to the Third Ward, it was announced that St. Mary's High School was going to be closed by the Archdiocese. I had to spring into action to work with them to remain open. Just a few months after that, South City Hospital was announced that it was going to close. It's the only hospital remaining outside of the Central Corridor. It was one of several hospitals that were actually in that quadrant of the city. The flight, began back in the 1960s, maybe even a little bit before that. Maryville University used to call Dutchtown home. It was founded right at Merrimack, on Merrimack, near Nebraska. There's a post office there now. Maryville Gardens, senior residential complex is there now. Maryville University moved out to the county in 1960. Just as many of the institutions that called North St. Louis home moved out to the county, so have many of the institutions in Southeast City. Concordia Seminary was founded there. St. Anthony's Hospital, which is now Mercy South, was founded there. It was on the corner of Chippewa and South Grand for up until about the 1970s when they moved out to South County. This isn't something that has happened in the last 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. It has been decades as well. Now, I have and always will, stand up for North St. Louis and the residents up there as well. I've supported housing programs. I reformed our incentive programs down here to ensure that North City and Southeast City get a fair bite at the incentive apple, whether that's tax abatements, whether that's tax increment financing, whether that's having special use districts, Chapter 353s for redevelopment areas, and being able to put more tools in that toolbox. But what I cautioned earlier was that as soon as we start making these amendments, there are programs and geographies that were included in both of the original bills, both 131 and 153, talked about North St. Louis. They talked about and had resources for downtown, and they had resources for Southeast City. So if we're going to go down this path, then I have to be able to stand here in good conscience support my constituents and ensure that they have access to these funds as well. Thank you.
Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to the Alderman from the 3rd for those comments. I agree, and I think that it's a disservice to our residents when we try to do legislation this way. We haven't even spent the majority of the ARPA money yet, and it's really not being honest with people if we're acting like we're past this bill. I mean, why not make it the whole amount, right? And then just pass it today. It doesn't mean that money's going to arrive in the community tomorrow. And I realize that it's hard for people at home to follow this, but when we get handed these amendments like this, I'm looking at this and there are no definitions for this amendment. So I don't know what North St. Louis is in this. And that is a disservice because if this passes, then this money might not make it to the places that it really should make it. There's a second severability clause and a second emergency clause. This is just not how we should put together legislation. And while I realize some people are commenting on the comment I made earlier about this is the only piece that was in both bills, I want to further dial down on it. This is the water was the only piece that had identical language in both bills. Both of the bills had different plans for North City and Southeast City, had different language that were treating it. Water was the only thing that had identical language that we all agreed on. So I am very proud of my colleagues today who have come together and recognized that while we are still discussing many of the urgent needs of the city, that we can agree on one thing and move that forward today. I think that shows that we are adults in the room and that we can actually get things done for the people of this city. And I look forward to passing out a water-only bill to get that money moving. I also was remiss earlier in not thanking the Alderwoman from the 7th for her work on this throughout the many months that we've been doing this. I know it's been a lot of work, and the work continues, and that work has not gone to waste. So I look forward to the additional discussions, and again, I thank my colleagues for sticking with us today and making sure that we get the money where it needs to go and where it can be readily used and quickly used. And then I give my absolute word, and I know my colleagues do, many of them do too, that we are going to come back and we're going to make sure that North City gets the money it deserves.
Need further discussion? Need further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, I keep hearing several of the newer alder people say, well, that's the only thing we agreed on was water. The reason why we agreed on it was not because water was the most important, was because it was going to be a package. When you have a package, then you can agree on some stuff. When you start taking stuff out the package, I no longer agree with it, okay? I've been married for 38 years. I got a package with the man that's my boyfriend for all these years. When he started changing that marriage certificate or the vows we did, that ain't the same marriage. So this, what you're bringing me, is not the same, okay? And I want to say, too, I understand the alderman from the 3rd, because I still want to say the 25th, talking about fighting for his ward. You should. But I want everybody, every time there's a problem, and we start talking about North St. Louis, people will say, well, what about Southeast St. Louis? Here's the thing. There was no actual board bill down here to disinvest in Southeast St. Louis. But there actually was a board bill, and they commissioned something called the Team 4 plan to take services from North St. Louis. There was no applying for money, for block grant money in Southeast St. Louis and then not spending it. But there was that for the entire North St. Louis. And let's talk about something else. I was here when certain aldermen didn't want to do their jobs in Southeast St. Louis. When I came down here in '91, I passed the first conservation district in North St. Louis. None of the North St. Louis wards had it, and I had to have a lot of meetings, and I took a lot of heat for it. But there was an alderman in Southeast St. Louis, he refused to do the conservation district. The other South St. Louis wards were furious with him, but he refused to do it. I don't say his name now because he's passed, but it's on record, okay? So I can't compare what happened to Southeast St. Louis to the planned attack and the racism that happened in North St. Louis. It was planned and it was attacked. Ineffective leadership is different than actual racism and planning to make sure we don't have things. There's a reason why we don't. I had the first school, the first grocery store, the first bank, the first, a second Walgreens, because they planned for us not to have that. And so when you sit and compare them, yes, you should fight for your ward, but I also want to tell you it's the difference when men talk about sexism against men versus women talking about sexism against women. It's a very different thing. That's what I want you to know. So when you've had ineffective leadership, which you had, then that's different, and then you have to sit on it. If it was just, North St. Louis had ineffective leadership, you would not see the 5 North St. Louis wards that were middle and upper middle class go down. That was planned because no money was spent. And if you go look at the money that was spent in Southeast St. Louis, they still spent more money with ineffective leadership than they did in North St. Louis, okay? So that's the problem. I'm not saying that I don't want you to have money, because I've already told you, I want us to sit down and do a complete plan. I don't want a piecemeal. Those people who don't want piecemeal, then the water department, just doing the water department is piecemeal. So if you're gonna talk the talk, then walk the walk. Do not vote for the water and leave Southeast St. Louis out, leave North St. Louis out. Downtown, I don't want to be left out because I want an economic factor. And I told you, I don't even agree with doing the daycare and stuff. But if that's part of how we get done, that's part of how we get done. But just to bring out and say, oh, the water, and then have people sitting right next to me talking about, but we shouldn't spend this money, then I tell you what, I'm more comfortable with letting water sit up there since we all agree that water should be done, and then we get all the monies for the other parts than to pass only water. Because what you're saying to me is, I don't care about your neighborhood, and you don't hear yourself saying that to me. And when you're doing that, I'm not going to support it. I'm going to fight it with my last breath. I'm going to ask the mayor to veto it. That's not good legislation. And by the way, Friday, I said to all of you, with me with no name on either board bill, we need to slow this down. We could come back with heads have a cool down and tempers have cooled down, and we could sit down together and try to put something. And I'm not running for re-election, surely enough, but I'm not trying to pass something because somebody's running for re-election that's hurtful to my community. So that's what I'm saying. I cannot support water. I would suggest we put all these things down and just put it on informal calendar, and then we come back in here and we spend the time to really work on what's important and be truthful about it. And if you're thinking that, oh, we may not be able to spend this money because we're going to need it for things, then I'm not spending it on the water department either, okay? So it is a package deal. I'm married. The day that my husband comes to me and says, look, I want to bring a third person into this, we're getting a divorce, okay? We're getting a divorce. That is not how it works. So when you come to me and say, I'm taking water out, but I'm taking out everything else that was in there, that's a divorce. And then you no longer have, and all of you all who are married know that, okay? Well, most of you all, because maybe some of you all have some fantasies about a third person, but I ain't one of them, okay? So you are not bringing the bill, and your way of thinking that, well, we all agreed on water. I agreed on water a long time ago before any of you all, but I didn't agree on water by itself. I agreed on water as a package deal, and I still think that people should all get some of them, even the things that I disagree with.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to put on record that I know there's going to be a lot of hesitation around $100 million to North City, but I know there were a lot of people who were very excited about $100 million to downtown. And so I just really wanted to make sure that that was included in the conversation, because I think what you hear from some of my colleagues is the frustration of the different mentalities that we have as far as what communities are worthy of investment and what communities are not. And obviously, you know, Southeast City and North St. Louis does not have, you know, a greater St. Louis or another entity that has a groups of investors and a board that are supposed to champion it. But I just think that all these things, especially as the public watches, that you all should be paying attention to that very point, that there are going to be people for a number of reasons. Again, for me, I think that the way we are doing this is not proper to our city. I think that we should come together and we should have a coordinated plan on what we're going to move and how we're going to move it. But I also do want to note that I know I've had several conversations that there are several folks a part of this body who would not blink to hesitate to vote for $100 million to downtown, but will have a lot of hesitancy to do so for North City. And so I just wanted to make sure that was a part of our conversation today. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This all sounds like discussion that we should have been having in committee. I think it's a shame that we're having it on the floor. It's a clear sign that the legislation isn't ready to go. You know, I'm looking at these amendments. There aren't definitions that need to be there. There's duplicative language. Even the amendments aren't ready to go. And, you know, I voted to send, $37 million to the north side with the ARPA funds and that first tranche of ARPA funds. And we saw what happened with those funds, and it's not getting to the people that it should be getting to. And I would really encourage everyone to just pump the brakes on this. All we have to do today to be successful is nothing. The interest will keep on growing. We don't have to worry about these funds being disgorged from the city. We just need to pump the brakes and make sure that we get this right. And in the meantime, we're making more money. Let's not get in our own ways here. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th?
I just,
Or-
point of information, are we on the amendment for,
We are on amendment number 3, which is the $100 million for the north side.
oh, so we haven't taken up the Alderman from the,
Third
Third
amendment,
amendment.
correct.
Okay.
We still have, we skipped over amendment 2 to amendment 3. That's what's confusing at the moment.
and I have if the Alderman from the 14th would yield.
The alderman from the 14th yield to questioning from the alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Okay.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Madam President, members of the board. Alderman, I'm on page 2, section B of your amendment, and there seems to be some kind of little error there. There is hereby appropriated a sum of $37 million, and then you go on and it says 75. So what is that supposed to be?
Yes, Madam Alderwoman. Yeah, that's a scribbles error. So it should be 500 million. So it should be 75,500. I'm getting my numbers confused, but it basically should be 75.
75,500,000?
Yes, that right there.
Okay. All right. So I just want to have that be corrected so that we all are on the same page.
Is that a friendly amendment to
It really just
scribblers?
error,
Okay.
right?
I'll get with the clerk on that.
So 1, 2, line 3, and 4, right? Okay. And also, you and I have talked a little bit yesterday about this amendment, or the previous amendment, and I have told you, we have talked about over the years about just how North St. Louis have been disinvested. And I heard some people say, well, this has been going on for a long time. So, in other words, if my husband beats me, and he's been beating me all the time, there's no time when I say, you're not going to beat me anymore? Is there actually a time that we say, stop this madness? So if this disinvestment is going on for a long time, isn't this the time we should stop this madness and start doing some investment? Is that what you believe?
I believe so. I mean, I think the reality is, my colleague from the 9th said this is not how we legislate, but if we go back to Friday, that's literally how they legislated on the floor by stripping bills and only saying, let's go with water. So, and then they, take photos in the 14th Ward on a birthday tour and, come to North St. Louis and talk about the beautiful architecture. But when it's actually time to say, okay, we're going to invest in North St. Louis, it's like, oh, well, let's wait, but let's do water, because water is something we all agree on. And again, I think you have several folks that are saying we can do water and North St. Louis, even if it is not, if it was 50 million. I heard from the Alderwoman of 11 and the Alderwoman 13 said that wasn't enough. I agree. So let's figure out a number that we can get it to make sure that we do not leave out North Side, something that was in both pieces of legislation. That's not keep saying we're going to come back to North Side, but and then we'll stand on this floor and talk about, or in the HUD's committee, how North St. Louis needs so much investment, how North Side needs a jump in energy to be, able to be invested in. This is a opportunity right now, and let's not act like these conversations haven't been going on in committee. I think it's either fair that we will take the opportunity to make the motion to do something today, or, let's just come back to the table on all of them. I still haven't heard from anybody why we can't come back to the table and do it all together besides to just say, we all agree on water, but we also agree that North St. Louis has been disinvested in a very long time, so let's do both.
And how much funds total? I'm trying to think. We were leaving funds on the table in both bills, I believe.
Yes, we were I think actually in both bills, I don't know if we was leaving funds on the table. I think in 153, you have funds going to the mobility, you have funds going to infrastructure, you have funds going to child care, you have funds going to youth opportunities, city workers. I think we had spent most of that funds, and I think in 131, I don't want to speak for the Alderwoman to be incorrect, but I think there was 100 going to downtown, which they were going to do a match, and then Northside was going to get 130. So roughly all the funds would have been spent in both bills. So in this case, we're not spending all the funds. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but I thought there was also wasn't it water in?
Oh, yes, water was in 131. I want to say it was 50 million.
Okay.
Right now, we're just discussing 40 million and,
Right. So do you see, since everybody agrees that water is important, would there be a problem to do water later?
I don't see why we can't do water because the reality is if we're saying we're going to come back in a few months, which is 2 months, this $40 million isn't going to make an impact at the moment, right? And it's really going to be kind of again, I said it earlier, a drop in the bucket for our water division that needs roughly about 400 million. So,
more like $1 billion.
Yes. And Northside needs that same.
About it.
And Northside needs that same too. But the reality is if we can come back in a few months just to do one, I don't see why we can't come back in a few months to allocate $40 million to water, which is currently in both pieces of legislation. I think, right now what we got is a process that I don't think all sides are happy with. And I don't think it's fair to just say, well, we're happy with water and let's shove that down folks' throat and then just say every other idea, all the community members that are up here that have been coming for months and testify saying what they want to say, just come back next session, but we just going to do water today because that's what the Board of Aldermen agree on. And I know there's several members that do not like neither pieces of legislation in the process. And I think if that's the case, you have two alderwomen, a woman from the 13th that's still committed to, I think, working together to try to figure out what it is. And if that's the case, let's pause on the Rams money. Let's continue to let it grow interest. And then let's come back in a few months and try to figure out a true compromise and not do what they're saying we shouldn't be doing it this way. But if we go back to Friday, that's literally what happened. You see the amendment that the alderwoman for the first had was to strip completely the alderwoman from the 7th Ward bill completely out and say we're just doing water. And then they had a backup plan as they discharged another one. And if she would have put hers on the informal, there's in our drive right now from the alderwoman from the first to have another floor sub on 131 to just do water, which I think is unfair. So let's take a pause and let's do it the right way.
So, as I've already said, both the president and the mayor can call us and back in. Now, the mayor can call us back in at 3 days' notice to a special session in which we could just deal with these Rams funds, okay? Is that something you would be opposed to while we would be still meeting? So, because that way we could have a total bill instead of one part of a bill. Is that something you would be opposed to? I
would not be opposed of it. And I think it makes everybody feel comfortable to make sure. I totally understand where the alderman from the 3rd is coming from to make sure that Southeast isn't left out because, when you go to Dutchtown and you go off Merrimack in the commercial district, they also need support. There's spots in the 1st Ward that with the EGI language that was accepted, and I know the alderwoman voted for that in committee, where these funds can be able to help outside of just water. We're talking about housing. We're talking about infrastructure. All these things are important. One is not more important than the other. Yes, we have the best water in St. Louis, and I can promise you if we wait to do this legislation, if we don't invest the $40 million, we will continue to have great water. And I know this board is committed to trying to figure out how do we invest in multiple things to actually move this city forward. But as they say, we shouldn't piecemeal. That's literally what we're doing if we only do water. We're saying water is the only thing, and that's what we're moving forward. And I just think that's some of my alders say is not the right way to do this for Northside. I think in the whole spirit of everything, that's not the way to do, if that's the case, legislation completely. Let's take a pause, let's start over, and let's come back and make sure it's right.
And so when you were agreeing to water, you weren't just saying only water. It was a package deal, correct?
Nobody in the committee of the whole or during these processes said, we just want water. We've seen people that came from North St. Louis said, invest in Northside. We've seen people from the childcare industry say, invest in childcare. We've seen people from downtown said, hey, invest in downtown and we'll have a matching fund. Nobody just said, hey, Board of Aldermen, just do water. None of the working groups that we had, none of the testimonies that we heard on both bills said, hey, let's just do water. They said, let's do water, let's do these other things. And, either, again, we could take it up as a full package or we can just come back and actually listen to the residents and work hard as colleagues and use our disagreements to try to figure out a way to get to a place where we all can agree to move one big package of a Rams bill forward. But if it's okay to come back for North St. Louis, I'm going to be real. I think it's okay to come back for water because our water is not going to go away if we do not do water right now. We just also raised the residents
rate again.
And
this is literally, what is this, February the 3rd, 4th? What day is this?
Which day in Black History Month? I want to say the 4th.
The 4th.
The
Okay.
4th.
And in about 2.5 months, we'll start a new session. So even if we didn't agree on something in the meantime with a special session or something, we actually come right back in the 4th. So the only reason I can see is that people want it for political reasons, which is not in the best interest of my community, okay? Other than that, there is no reason to ram a water bill through and leave the rest of it. And people can tell me, I promise you I'll for North St. Louis good. Put your vote where your mouth is, and then put the water bill to the side. And I promise you I'll be for water bill since I was for water bill in the very first place over a year and a half ago. Put your money and put your vote where your mouth is, and let's do something for North St. Louis, let's do something for Southeast St. Louis, or let's not do anything at all.
And I agree. I think I seen a interview where our colleague was like, you know, we need to do something, and this water is the only thing we can do. And I don't think that is fully true to the citizens of St. Louis. It's not fully true to our constituents that this is the only thing that the board can accomplish. And it shouldn't be, let's just do something to make it seem like we're functional. Being, you know, as they say, the sausage making process of stuff like this is how, you know, it's not that it's not healthy. You know, I do think it's good to have debate, but just to say, we just need to do something, so we're going to do water and everybody else take a back seat to next session. That's also, I don't think, fair. And we absolutely, I think, should be doing a lot more than just water. And if it's not that, let's come back in 2.5 months. Let's not just say to the voters, oh, yes, we did some, you know, with Rams, we walked away, we did water, like all good and all done. And the reality is that we didn't. And there's a lot of, I think, people, I've been getting emails since yesterday on Board Bill 131, a lot of people in my ward, the downtown, saying, hey, invest in downtown. I've been getting calls from people in North St. Louis that seen this happen, like, what's happening to the investment in North St. Louis? So just to say we're doing some with water, I don't think is also fair for so many other constituents that bought into this process that want to see investments in their community.
Thank you. If the Alderwoman from the 13th would yield.
The Alderwoman from the 13th yields questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, Alderwoman, when you were working together, because we started talking to downtown, we being the Black Caucus, when we were 28 wards, about if we could put something together to work with downtown. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
Okay. But as we talked about it and how we would do that, and water became part of the, excuse me, Alderwoman from the 7th, you're my line of vision. Thank you. Was it ever your vision that we would just do water and nothing in North St. Louis or any place else? Was that your vision in your bill?
No, and that's why, no.
Okay. So, do you see any reason why since we're at the end of the session, but we can be called into chambers by the mayor with 3 days' notice, or we're going to start a new session April 15th, I think it is. Do you see any reason that we have to push this through and leave North St. Louis or even Southeast St. Louis out and then just do water? Can you give me a reason why that would be?
And so I don't look at it as leaving North or Southeast St. Louis out of the scenario. I look at what I said in the beginning when I first presented 131. Let's hold it to the new session.
Okay.
And so it didn't make a difference about one or the other. But as part of with the water, I do understand, because when the mayor's office called me about the Rams money, and they said, what do you want to do with the Rams money? I said infrastructure. I made it clear. I said, take all of it for infrastructure. So that meant for us to put money into that water so we can correct those issues. And so that's how we came to this conclusion, because nobody wanted to listen. I said, hold it. And so, yeah, I support the water because I feel that it's critical to us. But I also realize, Alderwoman from the 12, that these other neighborhoods are in dire need. And so that money that we can raise more interest off of that will help us. But I don't think people are listening. And so I have a problem. And you know better than anybody, because you taught a lot of us down here. People continuously want to speak for us and tell us what's best for our wards. And so that's the problem I'm having with the whole scenario, because, yeah, you tell me you want to give me $100 million, but I got people already cutting deals on how to spend my money. I don't think that's okay with me. That's why I'm saying no. We need to hold it because it's not fair. And I do support the water because I'm one of those people, wards that was impacted when my community was impacted for 30 days in zero weather. Pipes had collapsed.
Yep.
We had no water. So I'm one of those people. The 14th ward was one of those people that had cars that had got flooded. So I do think water is critical. But I also think, as far as don't nickel and dime North St. Louis, 50 million here, 100 million here. Let's sit down and let's make it real what we're going to do. And these 4 black alder people need to say what projects they have, what's their priorities. Nobody should be speaking for us, Alderwoman.
So would you have a problem if we put both board bills on the informal calendar and we worked on an agreement or tried to again, and if we couldn't do that, we held it to the next session?
I can't speak for 153, but I can speak for 131, and I made that recommendation from day one.
Okay. And so I also know you talked about the problems about the water department. So during my lifetime of being elected, I've gone down that street by the water department, and it's been underwater on numerous occasions. So many times it's not funny. So people don't know that, okay? They don't know that your ward goes to the chain of rock bridges, okay? When people tell us about, oh, we can't put the homeless in the workhouse because it's so far out. They don't know Baden is right across the street. I think I'm going to get a bus one day and take people on a tour of North St. Louis, because they always want to talk.
Let them see what we
talk
did
for North St. Louis, and they don't even know what it is or how it exists. Okay.
Right.
So I'm really going to ask you, and I'm going to ask the Alderwoman from the 7th if they wouldn't just put both of these bills on the informal calendar, and that we work on some other kind of solution. And we not say that water is any more important, because it can't be any more important than you, because the water department is right there in your ward, and your constituents are dealing with it. Even before you got in office, they've been dealing with it, the floods and everything. And one of the first things that we normally do when you're a new alderperson is they take you out to the water division so you can see and how water is done in the city of St. Louis. And we've been very, very lucky that we have some very good water. But as I said before, back a year and a half ago, I brought up us doing stuff for water then, and nobody wanted to do it. So all of a sudden now it is important, but you want to leave out North St. Louis or even Southeast St. Louis. That doesn't sit well with me, okay? And so I want a whole deal. I started out with the whole deal. You're married for a long time. Your husband can't break half of the deal and say, oh, the only thing that's important to me is this. It's all a deal together. Isn't that right? When we put the deal together, that was your problem with the original deal getting changed after you had the press conference. Is that
Exactly.
That's what you're saying? And this is what this is doing, is trying to change the agreement. So I'm hoping that you, and then I'm going to ask the Alderwoman from the 7th if she would yield next, but I'm hoping that you would consider putting it on the informal calendar, and we could try to work on it some more, because this is not a good idea right now.
And so thank you for that comment. But let me be very, very, and you know I'm going to be very point blank. I might not say what people want to hear, but I'm going to say what my heart tells me to say and what my God makes sure that I bring out of my mouth. People need to understand politics is about negotiation. But when you come back door and you have came to an agreement and people sit up and disrespect you as a senior legislator and say what you did means nothing because I'm going to control this scenario, that's what I call is disrespectful. In regards to what came up in regards to the water piece, we came together, my co-sponsors, and we made it clear that we knew that we were going to have to hold this bill, but we were struggling because of the weather change, the dynamics for our city, the pipes expanding and decreasing, and I don't know all that because I'm not the engineer, but I know enough to know that we have to push to try to make sure that we take care of our residents for a basic piece. And so I'm not saying that we can't hold the bills. I never said that. I've always pushed for that. But Alderwoman, you know as I know, when people disrespect you and then they cut you, and I'm going to tell you what I told some other people. They cut your throat, didn't put a Band-Aid on it, and then they stabbed you in the back. They screwed you and didn't put grease with it. And then you say, oh, everything okay. No, it's not okay. And so that's something I will never forget because you warned me. And I'm going to publicly say, you told me that was going to happen. And I fell for the okie doke. So thank you, Alderwoman Tyers.
"30 years of experience has not been good for me. My ward has been attacked on 2 occasions, one from this very board, because when you take seniority from me for the second time, you're attacking my ward. I was wondering if the Alderwoman from the 7th, before she leaves the floor, would yield. If you have to go, I will ask.
The Alderwoman from the 7th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. Madam President, members of the board, thank you for taking my questions. I've asked the Alderwoman from the 13th if she would consider putting her bill on the formal calendar. And is that something you would be willing to do at all, or are you hell-bent on just getting this water bill done?
If Alderwoman Boyd wants to also put her bill on the informal, then I would be okay with putting it on the informal. You know, like I said from the beginning, it really was my goal with this process to demonstrate us having the ability to work together and to make sure that we were able to build, compromise. And I think, I was under the impression that water was a shared agenda item for all of us, but after conversations and going around the floor today, it seems like some folks have changed. And I do understand your point about, realistically, water is not going to move in the next 2 months.
Correct.
We'll be back in April, even if there's no special session called.
Correct.
But I wanted to also honor what I thought was the general consensus of the body. But if Alderwoman Boyd wants to put hers on the informal, I'm also willing to put mine on the informal.
So I want you to understand, water is important to me. That's why I talked about it a year and a half ago, okay? But it was, when we put it in this deal, and I didn't put my name on any bill, it was part of an agreement. And I thought you guys were going to continue to still work. And so I was asked to put my name on a bill. I said, no, I'm going to stay out of it because they're working together. So that's what you don't know. So I didn't want to get in the way of it, okay? But at this point, we're not working together. We're taking a part of it. And I will tell you again, you're putting a deal together. If you take one part and say, well, this is what everybody else agrees on, that is not the comprehensive deal, and it's not why I agreed on water. I wanted water along with everything else at this thing, and that's what I think many people are saying. So if you're both saying you'll put the bills on the informal calendar, which one of you want to do it first? Because we can stop this madness and move on.
I mean, she beat me to the punch. I was going to already do that. I was going to already say I wanted to put Board Bill 131 on the formal calendar.
Thank you very much.
Second?
No, you don't have
sorry,
to
no
second.
second.
Now, will you put your bill on the formal calendar?
Madam Clerk, could you please place 131 on the informal calendar?
I would like to place Board Bill 153 floor substitute as amended on the informal calendar as well.
Madam Clerk, if you could also please place 153
Floor substitute.
Floor substitute on, no amendment has passed as of this time. So
Okay.
153 floor substitute 2 on the informal calendar.
So noted.
Please, Alderman from the 9th, please state your point of order.
Rule 70 states that the principal sponsor may defer action unless 2/3 of all members of the Board of Aldermen vote to consider such bill. So I would like to call a roll call about moving this to the informal calendar
For both bills?
for 153 specifically.
For 153. Okay.
Is there discussion before we take roll?
You can have discussion on that motion, yes.
Thank you. I do support that motion. Again, I just think we've all talked about collaboration, and this is quite a bit. And I think it's clear that we don't necessarily have consensus. I just walked around the floor and asked all of our colleagues as well how they might feel about the water component. And again, I have to say, I think we're here because of conversations that were not fully inclusive from the start. And so I just wanted to make sure that was on a record as we were having this conversation, that we've talked on and on about collaboration, all of us working together. And it is my understanding from where we are now that there are folks who were very on board for water that now, want to wait and want to hold. And again, we're not going to move water in 2 months. We will be back, or special session should be called, but I wouldn't even lean there. And I just want to make sure we're doing what's best and what the full body most wants. And it's very unfortunate that we're in this position and haven't had the opportunity to build full consensus around these things.
There has been a request for roll call. The motion on the table is asking whether members of the board want to take 153 floor substitute off the informal calendar. And I vote would be yes to take it off the informal calendar. A no vote would be to keep it on the informal calendar. Just so we make sure that we're all have clarity on the motion that is before us. Alderwoman from the 1st.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I think this is exactly the situation that I was trying to avoid. It seemed like the thing that we actually had agreement on could move today, and instead, with the things that we don't agree on, are potentially going to keep us from moving today. So if that is the decision of the body, that is the decision of the body. It is just the kind of I guess we probably all predicted this could have occurred. So I hope that people vote to discuss this further, and I hope that we're able to move forward what Director Patel with the Water Division said could begin moving much sooner than the beginning of the session. So this is something that, it is really important to keep moving. I understand if my colleagues do not want to move anything this session, that is their prerogative. It is not my belief. Thank you.
Further discussion, Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just want to be clear. You said a yes vote is to, I would like to,
It's a motion.
I think we figured out the motion. I just want to be very clear is you have both sponsors right now saying, I want to put my piece of legislation, their piece of legislation with their name on it in the informal calendar. I mean, this goes back to, again, I think the division that I think some members continue to try to do. You just had the Alderwoman from the 12th have a conversation with the Alderwoman from the 13th, and she agreed with her piece of legislation, and anybody could have filed a Rams bill. That's why you see two, but with her piece of legislation, that she feel like she want more conversations and collaboration because clearly she is not at a place right now where she wants to move 131. Then you also have the Alderwoman from the 7th Ward who have worked on the piece of legislation also saying, hey, let's put it on the informal calendar. Let's try to figure it out. And then what you also are seeing right now is the Alderman from the 9th saying, no, I want to take up their bill and only do water when we've just had a long discussion and debate how people do not feel comfortable with just doing water. There's some other important things that I think the Alderman from the 9th has agreed on in the plenty of meetings that are on YouTube of why we need to make investment. So to just, again, try to hijack somebody's bill, hijack the process, which we seen Friday, is, again, like what I said, is nasty work. You see a senior and a youth black alderperson trying to say, let's take a pause, and you have, with this point of order, saying, no. After these sponsors have said, I want to put my legislation, tell me when this has happened in the last year and a half since we've been in session, when an alder, just out of respect, when they say they want to put their bill on their formal calendar, you do not see the privilege of another alder saying, no, you can't do that, and we're going to take up your bill. If I'm not mistaken, Madam President, are you saying a no vote is to not take it off the informal calendar?
Correct. So a yes vote will be to take it off of the informal calendar and continue debate. A no vote means that it would stay on informal calendar and there would be no further discussion today.
Thank you. And I'm still on discussion of the point of order, correct?
Correct.
Will the Alderman from the 9th yield for questioning?
The Alderman from the 9th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 14th.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Alderman, could you explain why you want to remove 2 members' bill off the informal calendar when they both just said, please put it on the informal so we can work it out, and why you know best as the Alderman on their piece of legislation?
Thank you for that question, Alderman. I believe the motion was only to move 153 off the informal at this time, and that's because none of these bills are just our bills, right? These are about the city. These are about the people that we represent. This is about making sure that critical needs are addressed in this city. And I've heard a falsehood repeated a couple times, I don't think intentionally, but this is why I asked about this specifically in committee. I asked our Director Patel, can this money get to work quickly? Can you get to work right away with some of this money if we pass it out? And he said, yes, we have a backlog of projects that we could get people working on. We could absolutely put this money. So I think that.
And when you say the director, who's that director?
Sorry, I'm talking.
But it's my inquiry.
I'm still speaking, though.
I end the inquiry. I end the inquiry. Again, I think what you're saying is privilege from the best of an alder that says we can pull any person's bill off, and it's not their bill. I don't recall any alder ever going to the Alderman of the 9th and saying, hey, I'm gonna pull your bill off. When he was working on the senior tax freeze and it wasn't ready at the quiet moment and it wasn't legally workable, you didn't see an alder say, hey, I don't like it, so I'm gonna pull your bill off so we can kill it. Again, the alderwoman from the 7th just said, put it on the informal. The alderwoman from the 13th just said, let's put it on the informal, let's try to come back. And again, because water's just so only important to the Alderman of the 9th and these other issues aren't, he just wants us to take 153 off the informal and just debate water, which again, to so many people that are saying, let's invest in North St. Louis, let's invest in infrastructure, let's invest in childcare, is not good enough. And we only just need to take up water because that is what's best. There is no rush to this. We've been saying this throughout the whole process. Let's take the time, let's do it right. And again, I think it is shocking that Alderman, you want to remove somebody's bill off the informal just because you think we should be doing water right now. No more questions, no more comments, Madam President.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderman from the 9th would yield.
The Alderman from the 9th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 12th.
Happily.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Alderman, you said that the director, is his name Mr. Patel?
Patel, yes.
That he said that we had projects that could get going pretty fast. Did he give you a description of pretty fast or soon? Did he talk about that we have to put out requests for proposal? Is that already done? So what is pretty fast?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a question that we would probably have to ask the director himself, which we did do in committee, and you can go back and watch that committee. We got a very good interview with him, and we were able to hear a lot about what the Water Division could do. And per the questioning, I think it's stunning that we're saying this is my issue. Is water, I mean, folks, can we tell, is water an issue that only the Alderman of the 9th cares about?
Excuse me, Alderman, you are yielding to me, so you really can't do that, okay? Yeah, thank you. You can get on the floor, but right now you're yielding to my questions. Thank you. And if I was in court, I would tell the judge to direct you to stop that, okay? So here's my next question. So you don't know, but I do, because I used to be the chair of public utilities. And I do know what the process is of getting things done pretty quick. And the alderman over the 3rd, who used to be the 25th Ward alderman, is smiling because that again goes to that seniority and experience. Pretty quick can mean 2 to 5 years down the road, okay? You can have things sitting on there and you no longer will be on this Board of Aldermen, but that'll be pretty quick. So if you don't have an exact timeline, I can almost guarantee you they got to figure out the project, they got to write up a request for proposal, they got to put that out. I'll guarantee you we will be back here and working on this. So it just doesn't work that way, and I'm not trying to trick you or anything. I'm just trying to tell you it doesn't work that way. I understand your need for water. Again, before you all ever talked about water, I did. But I am just amazed that the two ladies said we'll sit back down after everything that's been going on. So for me, I got kind of tears in my eyes of happiness that we're still trying to work it. And I would ask you all to please not try to get in the middle of that, because often when people get in their corner, they don't get back out. So this is something that the most of the experienced aldermen know it's not going to be how you think, and you can still call the question. You can take this bill, because they ran over here and asked me, and I said he can do that. You can do that. I would ask you to reconsider what you're doing. This is not a good idea when people decide that they're going to work together. This is not a good idea, and you will find out later what I meant. So it will not be the speed that you think it is, okay? That's what I want you to know. It could be years. The Water Department has a lot of things, and they'll be doing just what we're doing on this floor of all Board of Aldermen, going through the process. I have no further questions from you. Thank you.
Alderman from the 9th, just for clarity, we are on your point of order, and you had already been recognized on this subject, which is the reason that I am going to other members of the board before you. Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. So are we on the motion or are we on the point of order?
We are on his motion that he made through the point of order. So whether or not we should take the bill off the informal calendar.
Thank you. I don't want to make a kerfuffle over a point of order, but since we're on the motion, I just want to make sure that folks understand, if you vote in the affirmative on this, then you're bringing 153 committee substitute or floor substitute back to the floor, where we will just resume the conversation we were just having over amendments. So the reason that they just put those on the informal was to allow for those discussions to continue. So just to be clear, if you vote in the affirmative on this, if you vote yes for this, we have 2 amendments that will still be debated, deliberated, and possibly voted on. So just want to make sure that everyone is clear about that. The second thing is that if this is voted on, then I plan to put a similar motion before us to bring Board Bill 131 off of the informal as well.
Need further discussion? The clerk has notified me that there was not a second on the motion made by Alderman from the 9th. The clerk had informed me that there was not a second on the motion made by the Alderman from the 9th.
That's fine.
So is there a second? Second. Okay, it has been moved and seconded.
Where is he? Look, I'm going to choke him.
Any further discussion? Okay. Just keep your voices down. Alderman from the 9th.
Thank you. So I just want to be clear about what has happened today on the floor. We had a meeting that started with people in agreement that we could get something done today. We could have an urgent need addressed. And even if the Alderwoman from the 12th is right, it takes months or even years. That should add to the urgency of trying to move something that we all agree on and get it started. But to say that people think water is more important, no, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that we think water is the thing that we can agree on right now. We had multiple committee meetings where we looked at this bill.
Alderman, we're not debating 153 where the motion in front of us is whether to take this off the informal calendar.
Sure, I think this is relevant, so I'll keep it brief. But I think what we're looking at today is the board's inability to get anything done, and we see people trying to sow seeds of chaos into this through, I think, frankly, farcical amendments that aren't even written correctly. So we're getting to a point where we are, again, not delivering for the people we represent, and I just think if we put both these on the informal today, we're giving into that division, and it is a sad day for the people of St. Louis. With that, I am withdrawing my motion.
Are you withdrawing your second?
I will withdraw my second now that the Alderman Ninth has so profoundly spoke. Thank you.
Then 153 is remaining on the informal calendar.
That's the extent of board bills for perfection.
Report of engrossment.
Board Bill 107 as amended in committee, 157, and Board Bill 166 committee sub.
Third reading and final passage of board bills consent.
Board Bill 107 as amended in committee and Board Bill 157. Board Bill 166 committee sub at the request of the aldermen from the 4th and the 9th. They requested Board Bill 166 committee sub to be placed on a third reading, final passage of board bills.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you're recognized on the motion to adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the third reading, final passage of board bills on the consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we adopt the third reading and final passage of board bills on the consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderman Cone.
Aye.
Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderman Vollmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. 15 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 10th to third read and finally pass the aforementioned bills. Third reading and final passage of board bills.
Board Bill 166 committee sub sponsored by Alderwoman Spencer, an ordinance establishing an earnings and payroll tax reimbursement account in support of the project described herein, approving a development and performance agreement related to such project, authorizing execution thereof, and authorizing certain other actions by city officials.
Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized on the third read and final passage of board bills. Board Bill 166 committee substitute.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 166 committee substitute.
Is there a second? It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 166 committee substitute. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Board Bill 166 committee substitute is kind of a creative way of addressing a very tough situation we have downtown. As we all know, we are losing businesses downtown on a very regular basis, and what Board Bill 166 committee substitute does is provide a rebate of earnings tax for additional employees, a portion of their, a good portion, but a portion of additional employee earnings tax for Anders, which is a CPA firm, which is right down the street from us. They are renegotiating their lease with a bankruptcy attorney because their building is in foreclosure. So, there's a real tough situation here. We're trying to keep a professional, the existing earnings tax we have downtown. We're trying to keep their employees, and we're trying to provide a path for them to grow their employment base here in the city of St. Louis. And with that, I will yield for questions from my colleagues.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Will the Alderwoman from the 8th yield for questioning?
The Alderwoman from the 8th yield to questioning from the Alderman from the 14th.
I will.
Alderman, you may proceed.
And I just want to be clear. I see people up in the gallery, freaking out. I want to be on record. I support this piece of legislation. And I'll be voting for this piece of legislation, but I think it's important. Can you just kind of talk about the earnings tax rebate and like how that will work so that folks are just aware? And again, this is a good piece of development that should move forward, but could you talk about that process?
I can. Thank you, Alderman. Our earnings tax, as we all know, makes up about a third of our city's budget. After some recent lawsuits, of course, that 1/3 is a little probably on the high end because we know we're seeing some real challenges there. What this particular bill does is it provides a path for Anders, the employer, to have a rebate of a portion, like I mentioned, a good portion of the earnings tax of additional employees. I want to thank my colleagues in the President's office for helping to improve the bill by helping us develop a committee substitute that ensured that we were not counting new employees as folks that would be cannibalized from other accounting firms, but rather this would be required growth within the firm. And this does nothing to address the earnings tax for existing employees. In fact, the number that they currently have is sort of safeguarded into that. So if they do not grow, if Anders does not add an additional employee, this incentive package produces nothing for them. And so it is incumbent upon them, necessary for them to actually grow, to be able to have a rebate back. The employees would all pay the earnings tax into the system. Those would be tallied, and then the growth, there would be a rebate on a portion of those earnings tax, not the payroll tax, which would be paid by the employer, but the earnings tax.
And how long have Anderson been in the city of St. Louis?
Alderman, I had that figure. I don't have it in front of me.
I think they've been here over like 50 years.
A significant amount of time. That's right, Alderman.
And they've grown their business and employees in the downtown area and also just throughout the city of St. Louis. And I think some of those 200 plus employees that they have that was originally part of the first deal is now on the rolls for the earnings tax, which is bringing growth to the city of St. Louis. Am I correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you, Alderwoman. I appreciate your leadership on this and ask my colleagues to support this board bill. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 8th, you are recognized to close. Alderwoman from the 8th, you're recognized to close.
Thank you, Madam President. With that, I renew my motion and encourage my colleagues to vote to third read and finally pass Board Bill 166 committee substitute.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 11th, that we third read and finally pass Board Bill 166 committee substitute. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Aye. Alderman Cone. Aye. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velasquez. Aye. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer.
Aye.
Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Aye. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Aye. Alderman Aldridge.
Aye.
President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Sanye. Aye. Alderwoman Tyus. 13 aye votes, and 1 no vote.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderwoman from the 8th to third read and finally pass Board Bill 166 committee substitute. Report of engrossment, report of the finally passed and signed by the President.
Board Bill 107 as amended in committee, Board Bill 157, and Board Bill 166 committee sub.
All other business being suspended, the President shall in open session affix her signature hereto to the end that these may become law. This point in time, we're going to go back to the first reading of resolutions under the special order of the day to update the resolution to introduce board bills. There was one pay bill that was not given to the Board of Aldermen in time for the meeting on Friday. We want to make sure that those employees are eligible to get their raises. So Aldermen from the 4th, you are recognized on resolution number 251.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we suspend
the rules. Yeah.
I move that we suspend the rules to introduce resolution 251.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing resolution 251. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. 14 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion to suspend the rules for the introduction of resolution 251. Alderman from the 4th, you are now recognized on resolution.
At this point, I would move to wait.
First, we need to adopt the resolution.
Okay. Pardon me. At this point,
you need to ask for unanimous consent.
I request unanimous consent.
Hearing no objection, you may proceed.
Thank you. Pardon me on that. At this point, I move that we adopt resolution number 251.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt resolution 251. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 4th, you are now recognized on the suspension of the rules.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Sorry, I got out ahead of myself there. At this point, I move to suspend the rules for the introduction of Board Bill 182.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we suspend the rules for the purposes of introducing Board Bill number 182. This is a non-debatable motion. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Aye. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan. Aye. Alderman Balmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
Aye.
Alderwoman Tyus. 14 aye votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion from the Alderman from the 4th to on the introduction of Board Bill 182. Madam Clerk, if you could please go to first reading of board bills for the introduction of Board Bill 182.
So noted. Board Bill 182, sponsored by Alderwoman Velazquez, an ordinance relating to the appointment of salaries of certain employees of the City of St. Louis Board of Election Commissioners pursuant to 115.045 and 115.049 revised statutes of Missouri by repealing ordinance number 71702 and ordinance number 71887, allocating certain other employees to a grade with rate, including an emergency clause. The provision of the sections contained in this ordinance shall be effective with the start of the first pay period after approval by the mayor. That's the extent of first reading of board bills.
If you could please assign Board Bill 182 to the Budget and Public Employees
So
Committee.
noted.
Reference to committee.
To the Budget and Public Employees Committee, Board Bill 182.
Thank you.
That's the extent of reference to committee.
At this point in time, we will go back to second reading of resolution on our agenda.
Resolution 188, sponsored by Alderman Ryan, forensic hardware and software use plan authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you're recognized on the second reading of resolution 188.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we second read resolution number 188.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we second read resolution 188. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Resolution number 188 is a resolution on, I'm sorry, I'm pulling it up here. It's trying to get me to validate. There we go.
Forensic hardware and software.
Yes, the forensic hardware and software. Sorry, there's several of these, and I'm trying to make sure I get it right. So this is forensic hardware and software use plan authorization. This was vetted in committee pretty thoroughly, and all these resolutions did come out of committee with a do pass recommendation. This is part of the surveillance use plan technology that we passed last session. These are the use plans associated with them, and this came out of committee. We don't want to take away anything that the police department is currently utilizing, and I ask for your favorable consideration on Board Bill 188.
Resolution.
Excuse me, Resolution 188.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we second read resolution number 188. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 190, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, citywide camera use plan authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the second reading of resolution 190.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is a similar resolution. This one is for the cameras that are throughout our city. Again, we discussed this at length in committee, and I would ask for your favorable consideration.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderman from the 3rd, that we second read resolution number 190. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 223, sponsored by Alderwoman Schweitzer, President Green, Alderman Cone, Alderman Narayan, Alderwoman Velazquez, Alderwoman Sanye, Alderwoman Spencer, Alderman Browning, Alderwoman Clark Hubbard, and Alderman Aldridge. Solidarity with Garter World officers at St. Louis Lambert International Airport as they organize to form a union.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you're recognized on the second reading of resolution 223.
Thank you, Madam President and members of the board. I move to adopt resolution 223.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we second read resolution 223. Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As we heard in committee and as you can read in the resolution, this is about supporting workers at the airport doing security work as they attempt to organize. This is showing our solidarity with them, and I hope that we can pass this unanimously today. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 6th.
President, can I move to make this in bank?
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 6th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we make Resolution 223 embank. Is there any discussion on the motion to embank? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Alderman from the 3rd.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of the resolution. We had some really great conversation about this in committee. It passed out of the Transportation and Commerce Committee with a unanimous vote, and I was going to make the motion to embank it, but I am glad that the Alderwoman from the 6th was able to do that, and we're moving forward with this resolution. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 1st, you are recognized to close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 1st, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 10th, that we second read Resolution 223. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 186, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, cell site simulators, surveillance use plan authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the second reading of Resolution 186.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we second read Resolution 186.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we second read Resolution 186. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This particular resolution is about cell site simulators. Again, we had a robust discussion in committee. This is one that did not come out of committee unanimously. This is one of two that did not come out of committee unanimously. I want to acknowledge that. Again, we had a lot of discussion and got information from the police department regarding cell site simulators and what they can do, what they can't do. They're in the use plan, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderman from the 4th would yield.
The Alderman from the 4th yields questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
I will.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Would you explain to us a little bit what that is, cell sites?
Sure. So some of this is above my pay grade, frankly. But my understanding is that this piece of technology serves essentially as a cell tower. And so your cell phone pings that tower. And as a result, the police department, pursuant to a warrant, could utilize this technology to intercept discussion.
Okay. So I know that I read one of our former colleagues who works for organization had written you an email about their concerns about, I think, pretty much all of these resolutions. Was her concern addressed? Do you know?
I would say that part of it was addressed. I don't believe that the entire concern was addressed, to be frank. I'm not sure in the discussions that I had with the police department that we could address the entire concern based on language within existing contract, non-disclosure type language.
Right.
But we did have discussion on whether or not this cell site simulator was similar to what's been referred to as a stingray, which captures large amounts of data. It serves as a cell site and captures large amounts of data. And there had been discussion that those had potentially been used around protest and things of that nature to figure out, what people were talking about or doing. And this apparently, from what we heard in committee, does not have that capability. This is mostly utilized, from my understanding after the discussions, mostly utilized to locate missing persons, because they can see how far their cell phone
From the last.
is from the, yeah.
Okay, thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Would the Alderman from the 4th yield to an inquiry?
Would the Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 7th?
Absolutely.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you. We did have a robust conversation in committee about this, and I know everybody who watches committee doesn't necessarily, everybody who watches us on Fridays doesn't necessarily watch us in committee. So, and I also understand that some of the questions I'm about to ask are questions that are probably better suited for the actual police department themselves, and we did ask in committee, but I want to put them on record just for the general public to know.
Sure.
So I just wanted to make note, one of the things that has come up of concern for many of the folks that I represent who are concerned about, you know, there's a law at the state right now that they would like to do bounty hunters for immigrants and international members. There's a clear desire to go after Amendment 3 and other reproductive justice rights and potentially target people who might be seeking abortions or other healthcare procedures. There's a lot of concern about LGBTQ rights. And so one of the things that came up in committee from some of the folks who I talked to was an ask about the missing manufacturer's description and serial number that I believe is supposed to be there, but it's not there. So my question to you is, could you speak to the manufacturer's description and serial number and just maybe that information listing or ways how someone might be able to locate that if they wanted to be able to match up the specific technology and be able to figure out its full scope of use?
So my understanding, after speaking with the administration and the police department regarding this, is that the legislation itself does not require the manufacturer description and serial number. That's something that some of the advocates certainly wanted to include. That would necessarily make it so that anytime there was a change within kind of the brands of these things, that we would have to come back to the table and further parts of that manufacturer description we actually can't disclose to everyone based on existing contractual language.
Okay, I just wanted to put that on record and just, you know, I'm a good alderwoman. I know I had some folks who were concerned about that. I might disagree that we don't have the ability. I do disagree that we don't have the ability to put the manufacturer and serial numbers in there. And I would really urge us as a city to give as much information as we can so that we are clear on the full scope and can be aware of how other governmental bodies might use those things. But thank you for yielding to my inquiry.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First, I want to, so I don't have to say it at the end, I do want to commend the aldermen from the 4th Ward and all members of public safety, alderwoman of the 10th, alderwoman of the 11th, alderwoman of the 7th, alderwoman of the 6th, for not only going through these use plans in depth, but also getting us to a place which also the whole board did to have civilian oversight to make sure that folks just have more insight. And I left out the alderman from the 2nd Ward, but to actually have oversight. And want to also thank the community who came together to bring this legislation together. We've been working on it for a very long time. Started with our clerk, Clerk Kennedy, who was the first person to try to pioneer this, but for the community that continue to come to all these hearings. Sometimes I wasn't always noticed up perfectly. And I think, you know, we talked about that, and I know that's why some resolutions went back. There's definitely some growing pains, but if it wasn't for the community, we probably wouldn't have arrived to the place that we are now. I would say I don't think any of these resolutions are perfect. I think Monet from the department worked very hard to ensure that we had some type of process when it comes to these use plans, but there always can go further. Will the alderman of the 4th yield for questioning?
The alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the alderman from the 14th.
I will.
Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Alderman, was one of the concerns with the cell site simulator, and I think you even asked the same question of and I don't know if the alderman from the 7 brought this up, if this technology is being used to jam cell phones, mainly at protests, because there were articles and I think potential legal cases out there where it was kind of known that this is this technology was being used to jam cell phones at protests. Am I?
So that is something that I brought up in committee. I had concerns around the First Amendment implications regarding this technology. And my understanding, based on what the police department testified to at that hearing, is that the technology that they use does not have the ability to do that. And further, in the past, they have not utilized this technology at protests. They've only used it during or pursuant to a valid warrant or in exigent circumstances similar to the missing persons that I had addressed earlier.
And I think you also asked if this was similar to the technology, quote unquote, of like Stingray.
Yes.
And they said they have Stingray, or this is like similar to Stingray, or
They said this is not similar to Stingray. That Stingray has numerous capabilities that this cell site simulator does not have.
Okay. Thank you, Alderman, and truly thank you for your leadership on this. Hopefully look forward to being on public safety again in the next few years with you and figure out how we can make this process better, because no piece of legislation is perfect, and I think there's some hiccups in it. I will ask for a roll call on this one. This is one that, I don't support, and I think, still just need a little bit more information that the community is asking for, but appreciate you.
Likewise.
Alderwoman from the 7th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I just wanted to read a section of the legislation. It's Section 3, subsection D, and I'm reading it verbatim. Surveillance use plan or surveillance use plan submitted pursuant to this section shall be a publicly released, legally enforceable written report that includes at minimum the following. Number 1, general description, information describing the surveillance technology and how it works, including product descriptions from manufacturers. So I just wanted to read that because that is straight from the legislation, and I highlighted this in committee, that when we put things in legislation and we pass it and then we don't hold entities accountable to what is in it, it creates situations of community distrust. So I just wanted to make sure that I went on the record and highlighted my deep concern that this information is not in this legislation. Again, remembering that we are actively having conversations about local control being taken from us, and so the things that we put in place, the importance of vetting the technology, of knowing how it can be used, and community members having the opportunity to ascertain that for themselves is really important now, probably more than ever, because if we were to lose local control, they would have full access to the technologies that we put in place. So I just wanted to highlight that for the record. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. Just to address that last concern the Alderwoman brought up briefly, the issue with some of that is that it would put us in breach of existing contracts, and that's something that the legal department had to take a look at and figure out, basically. That's something that was brought up, and we did work through in committee. I know that we disagree there, and that's okay. That's what we're here to do. But with that, I will renew my motion.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we second read resolution number 186. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Pass. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Valmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanye. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
No.
Alderman Cone. Alderman Valmer. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. 8 aye votes, 5 no votes, and 1 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 4th to second read and adopt Resolution X.
Resolution 187, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, mugshot recognition surveillance plan usage authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you're recognized on the second reading of Resolution 187.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is a resolution regarding, I move that we second read Resolution 187.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 1st, that we second read and adopt Resolution 187. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This is a resolution regarding mugshot recognition software. There's, I guess, databases that you can run mugshots against to confirm identities. This was, again, discussed robust in committee, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt Resolution 187. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's too late. Opposed? Motion carries.
Don't say no.
Alderman from the 4th.
Resolution 189, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, sound thinking technology use plan authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you're recognized on the second reading of Resolution 189.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we second read Resolution 189.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt Resolution 189. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This, again, we had quite a bit of discussion on in committee, maybe the most discussion that we had just in general. This is the sound thinking technology. Some of you may know it as Shot Spotter. That's what it was previously called. We had a presentation in committee that explained how this triangulates gunshots and how many shell casings that the police department has picked up, sent to the lab, and been able to catch back up with people who are discharging firearms within city limits as a result of this technology. I know that there's been some controversy surrounding it in the past, and I think that the technology has steadily improved, and I ask for your favorable consideration.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I will ask for a roll call. It was first asked by the Alderwoman for the 7th for the record, but I'm just saying it on mic so the people can hear it. In committee, we had a professor from a university that came and he came and spoke about shot spotters. And I know years before being paid by law enforcement agencies, was in agreement that shot spotter in so many ways was junk science, and it is hard to know off of hearing a sound, which can be very similar when they have the video, can be a sound of a firework, if that is actually a gunshot. And, I think that for me, I think shot spotters isn't a technology that is super effective, and we spend a lot of taxpayer dollars on this technology. I want to be very clear. I want to make sure whatever the technology is, one, that residents know how it's being used and what's being used. I want to make sure we keep people safe, so I'm not against technology. I just want to make sure that it's effective. And when it comes to shot spotters, there's been a lot of data that has shown how ineffective shot spotters have been, and believe that there's various other technologies out there that the city can invest in that can be more effective to help solve crime in the city of St. Louis. We'll be voting no on this resolution. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderman from the 4th would yield, please.
The Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
I will.
Thank
Alderwoman,
you.
you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. First of all, I want to say that usually I don't like technology, but Shot spotters has been used in my ward under the former under the former police chief, and I'm shocked to hear that it doesn't work because it worked wonders. We got rid of so much gunfire under Chief Hayden. It's not funny. So now that if we even hear gunfire, we're like shocked because he had it over in certain places and it worked. So and you may not be the person to tell me I just heard the Alderman from the 14th talk about there was some problems with it. Can you explain that? Because maybe I just didn't understand there was a problem, because all I know is that we don't hardly have any gunfire anymore in those places that we kept shot spotter for a very long time.
Sure. Thank you for the question, Alderwoman. I think from what I gather from the presentation, and I'm certainly not the expert on this, but the technology has steadily improved over the years. When it first started, there were sometimes the triangulation of a sound would be a false positive. The old St. Louis fireworks or gunshots,
right?
And cars backfiring, things of that nature. But as time went on and they were able to learn better about the acoustics themselves of a gunshot versus a firework or a car backfiring, that they were able to improve the technology and cut down those false positives, because we certainly don't want to send police running every time something goes pop in the city, but we do want to ensure that anytime a firearm is discharged, that someone shows up and, first of all, make sure that no one was actually hit by any bullet, but also to see if we can take the individual who's discharging a firearm inside city limits off the streets.
Well, so I'm going to disagree a little bit. If they're shooting off those loud fireworks, I want them to stop that too, because that's illegal. And
sure.
Sometimes they sound like cannons and very loud. I want to say that this year has been one of the best years that not this year, but last year, right, or when we were coming into 2025, it was the best that I've seen, and I don't know when, about shooting off the fireworks and guns. It started at a certain time, but it was done in an hour. We experienced the same thing in the 4th of July. I wish people would stop that. They don't. But if ShotSpotter gets that too, I don't have a problem with that. I do believe that as we use AI and other things, we're going to get better at that. One of the things that I have a problem with, a lot of times, visual face recognition doesn't do well with Black people or Asians or Arabs or anything like that. So I have some problems about that. But I'll take them going when it's not really a gun, but it's a big boom. I want them to investigate, them being the police, to investigate that too. So I am going to support it because I've seen how effective it can be in my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st. We adopt Resolution 189. There's been a request for roll call. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Schweitzer. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Cone. Alderman Narayan.
Aye.
Alderman Valmer. Alderwoman Velazquez. Alderwoman Sanier. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Browning. Alderwoman Clark Hubbard. Alderwoman Keys. Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderman Aldridge. President Green.
No.
So noted. Alderman Cone.
Present.
$11 aye votes, 3 no votes, and 1 voted present.
By your vote, you sustain the motion for the Alderman from the 4th and adopted Resolution 180.
Resolution 191, sponsored by Alderman Narayan, GPS Technology Use Plan Authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the second reading of Resolution 191.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the board, I move that we second read Resolution 191.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st, that we adopt Resolution 191. Alderman,
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. This resolution has to do with GPS technology that the police department utilizes. I ask for your favorable consideration.
any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 1st. We adopt Resolution 1. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 192, sponsored by Alderman Ryan, automated license plate reader surveillance use plan authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on the second reading Resolution 192.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we second read Resolution.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st. We adopt Resolution 192. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. We again went over this in committee. The automated license plate readers are something that can be installed either on a existing traffic signal, and sometimes we see them on the police cars themselves. They're scanning for they're scanning the license plates that they pass, and they let a police officer know or the real-time crime center know that if someone is wanted on a felony charge, if a car is fleeing from an officer, it can pick up and in real time alert the officers as to where that car is heading, the last intersection it went through. This is really important technology that not only helps the officers, but it also cuts down the need to be in what they call hot pursuit of suspects. Because if you know where they are, where they're going, you don't have to put the public, the general public, at the same amount of risk chasing people down. I ask for your favorable consideration.
Alderwoman from the 12th.
Madam President, members of the board, if the Alderman from the 4th would yield.
The Alderman from the 4th yield to questioning from the Alderwoman from the 12th.
Yes.
Alderwoman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. As you can see, I am listening to your presentations. I have one question. These readers, which I agree with, because I have always been against the chase. Back when I first got elected, a lot of people got killed because the police were doing chase. And when I was the chair of public safety, we put out a position that the police not chase for minor traffic things because people had got killed with the chase. These readers will not read the temporary license plates, will they?
That is a good question. I don't believe so, but I'm not positive. I know that they won't read no plates,
Right.
which is something that came up in discussion. But I'm trying to recall, I don't believe that they read the temporary plates. I'm being told that they do.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember from the committee discussion, which was some time back.
And is there a barcode, or what is it that they read? I know it's something on the license plate.
They're reading the numbers and letters themselves.
Okay. And then that goes, but so it has to be a certain license plate, or do these readers, like if it was from Illinois, would they be able to read it, or will they only read Missouri plates?
They should be able to read any plate.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Absolutely.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 1st, that we adopt Resolution 192. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Resolution 193, sponsored by Alderman Ryan, body-worn camera and in-car camera use plan authorization.
Alderman from the 4th, you are recognized on second reading of Resolution 193.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we second read Resolution 193.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 1st, that we second read and adopt Resolution 193. Alderman, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I believe this is one of the least controversial out of all of these. I think that we've all seen over the years that regardless of where you stand having a neutral third party essentially have, which is the video, it lets us know what actually happened in any given situation. It both protects the public and protects the officers. These body-worn cameras have become huge in figuring out what actually happened in any given situation. Same with the dash cameras. We've all seen in the news on both sides how useful these are to come up with what actually happened on the ground. And with that, I ask for your favorable consideration.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, it's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 1st, that we second read and adopt Resolution 193. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
That's the extent of second reading report of standing committee.
Courtesy resolutions. Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adopt the courtesy resolutions consent calendar.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 3rd, that we adopt the courtesy resolution consent calendar. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Miscellaneous and unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
Monday. Oh, never mind. Tuesday, which is, no, I'm sorry.
Wednesday,
February the 5th, 2025. Budget and Public Employees will have a hearing in the Kennedy Room at 10 a.m. Thursday, February the 6th, 2025. Personnel will have a committee hearing webinar at 9 a.m. Legislation will have a meeting via webinar at 1 p.m. Friday, February the 7th. Full board meeting in the chambers at 9 a.m. That's the extent of the announcements.
Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 6th.
Thank you. I'd like to wish a happy birthday to our colleague from the 2nd Ward. I'd potentially ask that we sing happy birthday to bring unison to us. Birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Okay.
Happy birthday, dear Alderman Tom. Happy birthday to you. Thank you.
Alderman from the 2nd, or from the 3rd, sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. I was going to also make that announcement. I'm glad that he's here for announcements. You know, it's always good to see him. But also on a lighter note, I do want to mention the Grammys took place this weekend. Two first happened. One was Queen Bey, Beyonce, breaking records and getting the Grammy for country album, which is amazing. First Black female artist to win that award. And then also a Missouri native, Chappell Roan, had Best New Album as well. So bringing it home a little bit there was exciting to watch that and see history in the making, especially during Black History Month, to see Beyonce take that home. But also just want to make sure that everyone is staying warm. The temperatures are starting to improve this month, but we're going back down into low temps next week. So just want to make sure that everyone is staying safe, staying warm, and that we keep our neighbors in mind as we make our way through the rest of winter. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I also want to wish the Alderman from the 2nd Ward a happy birthday, but I want to give a huge shout out to Alderwoman Boyd, chairwoman of the Black Caucus, who brought all of us together this past Saturday to raise the flag for Black History Month. It has been going on, I want to say, for 12 years now. That was originated with Alderman Kennedy, but to all my black colleagues and all my colleagues at the board, thank you for continuing to always be at the flag raising and support something that I think is amazing, where we are the second city and second city to be raising the black flag. So thank you to all my colleagues, but especially thank you to my black colleagues for continuing to keep this tradition going. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 10th, are you? Nope. Any further announcements? Seeing none, Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to excuse.
Thank you, Madam President. All members were present this morning.
Alderwoman from the 10th, you are recognized on the motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board. I move that we adjourn until Friday, February 7th, 2025 in the chambers.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 10th, seconded by the Alderperson from the 3rd, that we adjourn until Friday, February 7th, 2025 in the Board of Aldermen chambers. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.